It was an ordinary Wednesday morning at the sleek, high-end car dealership, Luxury Drive Motors. The showroom gleamed under the bright lights. Rows of expensive cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Teslas, stood proudly on display. The sound of footsteps echoed across the polished floor as customers perused, admiring the vehicles with a level of quiet reverence. John Miller, the manager, stood behind the glass counter, scribbling numbers on a clipboard. His mind focused more on his problems than the shiny cars around him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Maybe I should just quit, John muttered under his breath. He hadn't been feeling inspired lately, not in his work, and certainly not in his personal life. The constant pressure to keep the dealership profitable, the never-ending complaints from customers, and his increasingly distant relationship with his wife had all left him drained. It felt like a career he didn't want anymore, but he wasn't sure where else to turn. Just as he let out a sigh, the door to the showroom swung open, signaling the arrival of a customer. John looked up, his eyes momentarily locking with the newcomer. A man dressed casually, wearing a simple black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Nothing about him screamed high-net-worth individual. In fact, John didn't even think much of the man's appearance. In his mind, this wasn't a serious buyer, just another person wasting his time. The man scanned the room briefly, his eyes briefly stopping on John before he started walking toward him. As he neared, John barely looked up, continuing to scribble on his clipboard. "Can I help you?" John asked, his voice flat, barely concealing his frustration with the monotony of the day. "I'm looking to speak with the manager," the man said calmly, his voice low but confident. John finally glanced up at the customer and gave him a once-over, still not recognizing who he was. "I'm the manager. What can I do for you?" The man didn't immediately respond. Instead, he took a step back and looked around the showroom, scanning the vehicles. John, not wanting to waste time on someone who seemed to have no idea what he was doing, sighed again. "Just so you know," John said, his voice a little sharper now, "we're only taking serious buyers today. If you're just here to look around, maybe you could come back later." The man's expression didn't change. "I'm serious," he said simply, his eyes meeting John's with an intensity that made John uneasy. The audacity. This guy was clearly out of his league, wearing that hoodie and making it seem like he was the one calling the shots. John rolled his eyes, standing up from his desk. "Look, buddy," he said, a little too loudly, "I really don't have time for this. If you're here to waste my time, I suggest you head back out the door." The man raised an eyebrow. His gaze was unbothered, almost like he was testing John. Then, with an air of calm that was almost too perfect, he pulled out his phone and glanced at it briefly before locking eyes with John once more. "Actually," he said, his voice smooth, "I think I might just be the person who owns this dealership now." John froze. The words hung in the air for a moment, but he quickly dismissed them. This was absurd. The man was clearly trying to play some kind of prank or joke. Maybe he was a YouTube star pulling off a stunt. "Yeah, okay. Nice try," John said, his tone still laced with sarcasm. "That's really funny. Now, if you'll excuse me." "I am Elon Musk," the man interrupted calmly. John blinked. He paused. Was this a joke? There was no way. "I'm sorry," John said, his voice low. "You're Elon Musk?" The man nodded, still holding eye contact. "Yes. I bought this dealership. I'm here because I need to meet with the team and discuss some changes. I was hoping we could talk." John stood there, stunned. Elon Musk. The Elon Musk. His mind was racing now, piecing together the pieces. He had heard that Tesla had made some moves in the automotive industry lately. And yet this was absurd. Why would Elon Musk show up here in a hoodie, unannounced in the middle of the day? I don't think you understand," John stammered, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "This is a luxury dealership. We don't do jokes here. You need to leave." Elon's expression didn't change. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't laughing either. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone again, and dialed a number. "Yeah, I'm here," Elon said into the phone, his tone casual as if he were having a normal conversation. "I'll meet with the team shortly. Just need to make sure John here understands who I am." John's heart sank as he realized what he'd just done. He had kicked out Elon Musk, not knowing who he was. His mind was racing. He had just insulted a man who could easily change the entire course of his career, and potentially his life. "You have 5 minutes to get out of here," John said, his voice cracking as he took a step forward. "Before I call security." Elon held up his hands in mock surrender, though his eyes were still calm. "Fine, but you'll want to reconsider that, John," he said, his voice still even, though there was a note of finality. "I'll be back shortly, and we will be talking again." With that, Elon turned and walked out of the showroom without another word, leaving John standing there, his face pale and his mind numb. John's heart thudded in his chest. As the door closed behind the stranger, John's knees almost gave way. He had just kicked out one of the wealthiest men on the planet, the owner of the company now, and he hadn't even realized it. As the sound of Elon's footsteps faded, John's gaze slowly dropped to the clipboard in his hands, now feeling heavier than ever. Why would he say that? Why would he tell me who he is? John muttered to himself. His thoughts swirled with confusion, dread, and regret. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a disaster. And the worst part? He had no idea how much trouble he was about to be in. John Miller sat behind his desk, staring at the empty parking lot outside the dealership's glass windows. The bright sunlight illuminated the rows of cars, but it did little to lighten the heaviness in his chest. His mind was still reeling from the events of the morning, and no matter how much he tried to focus on something else, he couldn't shake the image of the man he had just kicked out, Elon Musk. He thought back to how it all started. John had been working at Luxury Drive Motors for almost 5 years now. It was his dream job at first. He'd always been fascinated by cars, especially luxury brands, and being the manager of a dealership that sold some of the finest automobiles was something he had worked hard to achieve. He'd started as a salesman and worked his way up the ladder through sheer dedication, charm, and a knack for making sales. But now, it felt like a grind. The excitement had long since worn off. Lately, John had been struggling to keep his motivation up. He wasn't just dealing with the daily stresses of running the dealership, demanding customers, managing a team of diverse personalities, and maintaining high sales numbers, but also with his personal life. His marriage to Claire was on the rocks. They were barely talking anymore, and the distance between them seemed to grow with every passing day. The last few months had felt like a constant fight to stay afloat in both his work and personal life. John rubbed his face, trying to shake the exhaustion that was creeping up on him. He had a pile of paperwork to get through, but it was hard to focus. The mistake with Elon Musk hung over him like a dark cloud. He hadn't realized it at the time, but the situation was far worse than he had thought. What if Elon Musk really did own the dealership now? What if John's job was on the line? The thought of losing everything made his stomach turn. He had worked so hard to get to this position, but lately, it felt like no matter what he did, he couldn't escape the mounting pressures. The bills at home, the fights with Claire, and now this, an unexpected confrontation with the world's most famous entrepreneur. If he couldn't handle a situation like this, how would he handle everything else? John glanced at his phone. A message flashed across the screen. Claire? He had been avoiding her calls all morning. He wasn't sure what he would say to her, but he knew that if he didn't address their issues soon, everything would fall apart. Before he could decide whether to call her back, his phone buzzed again. It was a number he didn't recognize. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be Elon Musk? Hesitant, he picked up the phone. "Hello?" John said, his voice still a little shaky. "John Miller?" A calm voice on the other end asked. "Yes, this is he," John replied, swallowing hard. "This is Mark with Tesla Motors. Mr. Musk would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. We need to discuss a few things regarding the dealership and your position here." John's pulse quickened. "Mr. Musk would like to meet with me? Sure. Absolutely. I'll be available. When would be a good time?" John managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady despite the anxiety creeping into his chest. "Mr. Musk is expecting you in the conference room at 2 p.m. Don't be late," Mark said, and before John could respond, the line went dead. John stared at the phone in disbelief. This is it. He had no choice now but to face the music. Whatever Elon Musk wanted to discuss, it couldn't be good. The clock seemed to drag as the afternoon approached. John couldn't concentrate on anything as he walked through the dealership, trying to prepare himself for whatever was about to come. His mind kept racing. Was he going to lose his job? Was Musk going to fire him on the spot? Or worse, was he going to be dragged into some ridiculous corporate restructuring that would leave him with nothing? When the time finally came, John found himself standing at the entrance of the conference room, his hands clammy. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, Elon Musk sat at the head of a large, modern conference table, his posture casual yet commanding. He was dressed in the same outfit from earlier, the black hoodie and jeans giving him an almost unassuming look. But there was no mistaking the presence he carried. John felt his palms sweat as he stepped inside. "Ah, John, please, have a seat," Elon said with a smile, motioning to the chair across from him. "I hope you're doing well today." John nodded, too nervous to form a coherent sentence. He took the seat, trying to calm himself. This was it, the moment he would find out just how bad his mistake really was. "I'm sure you're wondering why I'm here," Elon continued, folding his hands in front of him. "Well, it's simple. I've recently purchased this dealership, and I wanted to introduce myself. I'll be making some changes here, and I need to see if you're on board with my vision for the future." John blinked, his mind still processing the first few words. Elon Musk bought the dealership? The words didn't seem to register at first. What? John finally stammered. "You bought the dealership?" Elon smiled, clearly amused by John's confusion. "Yes, I've acquired this dealership, and now I'm here to help make it the best in the world. But first, I need to know if you're the right person to help me do that." John's stomach twisted. This was worse than he thought. He wasn't just in trouble for kicking Musk out earlier. He was now dealing with the consequences of a massive corporate shift that could completely alter the trajectory of his career. But there was something in Elon's eyes, a sense of confidence and challenge, that made John want to rise to the occasion. He wasn't about to back down without a fight. I can do it," John said, his voice firmer now. "Whatever changes you want to make, I'm on board. I need to know what you have in mind." Elon leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Good, because things are going to change around here. We're going to focus on customer experience in a way this industry has never seen before. We're going to be leaders, not followers. And I think you've got the potential to help make that happen." John nodded, still processing everything. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes." Elon's expression softened, a hint of approval in his eyes. "I know you will, John. But there's one thing I need from you first: trust. Trust that the changes we make will be for the best. And trust that I'll be looking out for you, as long as you stay on the path." John felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Maybe this wasn't the end of his career, after all. Maybe, just maybe, this was a chance for a new beginning. The meeting ended shortly after, and as John left the conference room, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready for it. Little did he know, the journey was only just beginning. John returned to his office, his mind still racing with thoughts of the future. There was no turning back now. The world had just changed in ways he couldn't fully comprehend, and he had no choice but to face it head-on. The question was no longer whether he would lose his job. It was whether he could rise to meet the challenge. The next few days felt like a blur to John. The initial shock of meeting Elon Musk wore off, but the reality of his situation began to sink in. The dealership was undergoing rapid changes, and John was at the center of it all. He had barely had time to digest the implications of the meeting before the first wave of new policies hit. The first change Elon introduced was a new sales strategy. No more traditional selling tactics. Gone were the days of pushing customers to make quick decisions or upselling them on every feature. Instead, Elon wanted a more personal approach. He wanted customers to feel like they were part of something bigger. It wasn't about selling cars. It was about selling an experience that would make them feel like they were stepping into the future of automotive luxury. John could see the logic behind it, but the shift was more drastic than anything he had ever imagined. The sales team had been used to a high-pressure environment, And the transition to a softer, more customer-focused model wasn't going to be easy. The resistance was palpable. At the next team meeting, John stood in front of the staff, his hands clasped behind his back, trying to project confidence despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "All right, everyone," he began, his voice firm but not unkind. "Things are changing. We're going to focus on the experience from now on. We're no longer pushing for the hard sell. We're here to build relationships, not just make a transaction." Elon's vision is clear. This isn't just about cars. It's about connecting with our customers and making them feel like part of something revolutionary. He watched as the room full of salespeople exchanged skeptical glances. Several of them crossed their arms, unconvinced. John could feel the tension in the room rise. The old guard wasn't going to give up their methods without a fight. "Are we just supposed to wait for them to decide?" One of the top salespeople, Rick, asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. "How are we supposed to hit our numbers if we're not pushing them to close the deal?" John took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. He had been in Rick's shoes before. Change was difficult, and the fear of the unknown was a powerful force. But he needed the team to understand that this wasn't about making things harder. It was about positioning them to succeed in a new era of car sales. "Rick, I get it," John said, making sure his voice carried authority but also empathy. "This is different from what we're used to. But if we do this right, it'll make us stand out. We're not just selling cars, we're selling a lifestyle. And when people connect with us on that level, the sales will come." There was a long pause as the team absorbed his words. Finally, Rick shrugged and muttered, "Guess we'll see how it goes." John gave a small nod, though internally he was already preparing for a long, uphill battle. It wasn't going to be easy. The team's resistance was just the beginning. The pressure continued to mount for John as he tried to juggle these new changes with his personal life. His wife, Claire, had reached out again, but each time he tried to respond, he found himself too distracted by the whirlwind of new policies and demands from Elon's team. Their last conversation had been brief and distant. Claire was frustrated, and rightfully so. She had told him that it felt like he wasn't really there anymore, like he was living in a completely different world, one that had nothing to do with their marriage. John didn't want to admit it, but she was right. The dealership had consumed him in a way he hadn't fully realized. He had neglected the one thing that should have mattered most. The weight of that realization sat heavy on his chest, but he had no idea how to fix it. He couldn't help but think of the future. His mind was caught in a loop. The dealership, Elon's expectations, the team, the cars, the strategies, all of it. And in the background, there was Claire, fading further into the distance. "Maybe I just need to get a hold of everything first," he thought, pacing the office late one night. "Once things settle down at work, I can make time for Claire. I can fix things." But the problem was, John had no idea how long it would take for things to settle down. One evening, just after closing, John received a call from Mark, Elon's right-hand man. "John, we need you at the Tesla headquarters tomorrow morning. Elon wants to discuss some new developments." "It's important that you're there," Mark said, his voice clipped, as always. John rubbed his forehead, feeling the stress mounting. He had barely enough time to catch his breath, let alone take a trip across town to meet with Elon again. "Of course, Mark. I'll be there," John replied, trying to keep his tone even. After hanging up, John leaned back in his chair and stared out the window at the dimly lit street. The uncertainty of everything was starting to wear him down. The dealership, Elon's grand plans, the pressure to perform. It all felt like a weight he couldn't bear. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized something else. It wasn't just the dealership or his marriage that was at risk. It was his own sense of self. The man he had been before all of this, the one who had been driven, ambitious, but also balanced, felt like a distant memory now. In his quest for success, he had lost sight of the things that had truly mattered. His relationships, his health, and his happiness were all crumbling around him, and yet, he couldn't bring himself to slow down. As he stared into the darkness outside, John couldn't help but wonder, what if I lose everything, even after all this? The dealership, the success, the new changes, it was all moving at a breakneck pace. But if John wasn't careful, the very thing he was fighting for could end up being the thing that destroyed him. The next morning, John arrived at Tesla headquarters, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. As he walked into the building, he was led to a sleek conference room, where Elon was already seated, flipping through some papers. "Ah, John. Glad you could make it," Elon greeted, giving him a small, measured smile. "We've got some important things to discuss. I need you to be ready for what's coming." John took a deep breath, sitting down across from Elon. He didn't know what to expect, but something told him that this meeting would be a turning point. Whether it was for better or worse, he wasn't sure. "All right," John said, trying to steady his voice. "What's next?" Elon didn't waste time. He laid out the plans for expanding the dealership's footprint, integrating new tech, and rebranding the entire customer experience. It was ambitious, and if executed correctly, it could elevate the dealership to new heights. But as Elon outlined the plan, John could feel a growing sense of unease. There was no room for failure in Elon's vision. He couldn't afford to make a mistake now. As the meeting drew to a close, John's mind was spinning. There was so much to process, so many changes on the horizon. And yet, through all of it, one question lingered in his mind. Would he be able to keep it all together? The stakes had never been higher. The road ahead was uncertain, and John was starting to realize that the choices he made in the coming weeks would shape not just the future of the dealership, but the future of his entire life. He didn't know if he was ready, but one thing was for sure. He was in it now, whether he liked it or not. As the days passed, John found himself sinking deeper into the whirlwind of change that Elon Musk had set into motion. It wasn't just the new sales strategy that was pushing him to the edge. It was the constant pressure to adapt, to lead, and to succeed, all while the weight of his personal life continued to press down on him. Every meeting, every decision, seemed to require more of him than he had to give. And yet, he couldn't stop. The team was still reeling from the shift in philosophy. The sales floor, which had once been filled with the bustling energy of fast deals and competitive talk, now had a quieter, more introspective air. Some of the salespeople had bought into Elon's vision of transforming the dealership into a place where customers could feel more than just a transaction. They could feel part of something greater. Others, however, were struggling, unwilling to let go of the old ways that had always worked. Tensions between the team were starting to rise, and John could feel the cracks beginning to show. Rick, the top salesman, had become a constant thorn in his side. He was vocal about his resistance to the changes, often undermining John in front of the team, questioning the new sales approach, and throwing in jabs about how it was going to be impossible to hit their targets without pushing harder for sales. It was a constant challenge for John to keep the peace, and the cracks in the team's morale were becoming more evident with each passing day. At the same time, Elon was relentless. He stopped by the dealership almost every day, checking in on how things were going, making sure the changes were being implemented, and pushing for even faster results. The meetings with Elon were always intense, his presence commanding and focused. He didn't have time for hesitation or second-guessing. Every day, John felt as if he was on the verge of losing control. One evening, as John sat in his office, he stared at the glowing screen of his laptop, trying to get through the mountain of paperwork that was piling up. It was nearly midnight, and he was exhausted. His phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. An incoming call from Claire. He hesitated for a moment. His phone calls with Claire had become strained, with short conversations and unspoken frustrations hanging in the air between them. He knew it was bad. He knew that the distance between them was growing wider with each passing day. But the pressure at work made it hard to even think about their relationship. Still, he couldn't avoid it forever. With a deep breath, he picked up the phone. "Hello?" he said, his voice low and tired. "John," Claire's voice came through the phone, warm but with a hint of underlying frustration. "We need to talk." John closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. The last thing he wanted to do was have another difficult conversation. But he knew he had no choice. "I know, Claire," he replied, trying to muster some energy. "I've just been so swamped with work. You have no idea what's been going on at the dealership lately." "John, it's not just about work," Claire said softly, but firmly. "It's about us. You've been so focused on everything else that you've completely forgotten about us. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He could hear the hurt in her voice, and for a moment, guilt flooded through him. "I'm sorry," John said, his voice sincere. "I didn't mean to shut you out, but work's been insane. I'm just trying to keep everything from falling apart." "I get that, John," she said, her voice softer now. "But you can't keep putting us on the back burner. I need you to be present. I need to feel like I matter." He didn't have an answer. He was torn between his professional obligations and the woman he loved. He could hear the frustration in Claire's voice, the same frustration that had been building up over the past few months, but he didn't know how to fix it. "I don't know what to do, Claire," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to keep everything afloat." There was a pause on the other end. Then Claire spoke, her tone more resigned than anything else. "I know you're trying, but I don't think I can keep waiting for you to figure it out." The word stung. John closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the situation settle on him. He didn't know what the future held for his relationship with Claire, but right now, he couldn't give her the attention she needed. And it broke him to admit that. "I'll call you tomorrow," John said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll talk about it more." "Okay," Claire replied, but there was no warmth in her voice. "But don't wait too long, John. You're running out of time." As the call ended, John sat in the dark office, his mind spinning. The pressure from work, from Elon, from his team, it all seemed to be coming to a head. And now his marriage was hanging by a thread, too. The following morning, John walked into the dealership with a heavy heart. His mind was clouded with thoughts of Claire, the future of his marriage, and how it all fit into the massive changes taking place at Luxury Drive Motors. He had just received a text from Elon, demanding that he finalize the new customer experience rollout by the end of the week. There was no room for delay, no room for mistakes. When John entered the showroom, the atmosphere was tense. Rick was standing with a few of the salespeople, engaged in a heated discussion. As John walked closer, he could overhear Rick's voice, louder than usual. "This whole thing is a joke. There's no way we're going to hit our numbers if we keep doing things like this. What's next? Are we going to stop selling the cars altogether?" Rick's voice was sharp with frustration. John took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying to steady himself before he addressed the team. "Rick," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm, "we've talked about this. The goal is to build lasting relationships with customers. We're not just selling cars, we're offering an experience. If you're not on board with that, I need you to let me know." Rick didn't hesitate. "This isn't working, John. You're making us look bad in front of customers. They want to make a deal, not sit around and talk about their feelings." John's patience was wearing thin, but he held his ground. "I'm not asking you to be anyone you're not, but if you want to keep your job here, you'll need to get on the same page as the rest of us. This is happening whether you like it or not." Rick glared at him for a moment, then shook his head and walked away. The other salespeople exchanged uncertain looks. John felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Could he really pull this off? The road ahead seemed steeper with every passing day, and the more he tried to push forward, the more resistance he encountered. Later that day, as John walked into his office to check in with his team, he found an unexpected surprise. A package was sitting on his desk. Curious, he opened it to find a sleek, black notebook with the Tesla logo embossed on the cover. Inside was a handwritten note from Elon. "John, you've got the vision and the drive. Don't let the obstacles cloud your focus. This dealership can be more than just a business. It can be the future. Keep pushing." John sat down, the weight of the words sinking in. He wanted to believe in Elon's vision. He wanted to trust that all of this would lead to something greater. But right now, it felt like he was holding everything together by a thread, and that thread was starting to fray. As he closed the notebook, he couldn't help but wonder, how much longer could he keep this up? John sat at his desk, staring at the sleek black notebook that Elon had sent him. The words of encouragement on the note were still echoing in his mind. "You've got the vision and the drive. Don't let the obstacles cloud your focus." But no matter how much he tried to hold onto Elon's words, the weight of the mounting pressures at the dealership was becoming unbearable. Each day seemed to bring new challenges, challenges that stretched him to his limits. The team was still struggling with the change in direction, especially Rick, whose open defiance had only increased in recent days. John couldn't blame him entirely. After all, the traditional sales tactics had worked for years, and now everything was different. But that didn't make his insubordination any easier to handle. The more John thought about the constant friction within the team, the more he realized that his leadership was being tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had always been able to lead through decisiveness and clarity, but now, with each passing day, he found himself unsure of the path forward. The dealership had undergone a drastic overhaul since Elon had stepped in, and while some of the changes made sense on paper, in practice, they were proving to be harder to implement than he had imagined. There was the new emphasis on customer experience, the pressure to integrate Tesla technology into the showroom, the constant feedback from Elon, who seemed to expect immediate results. Everything was moving so fast that John was starting to feel like he couldn't keep up. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was another message from Claire, but this time it was a voice note. His stomach sank. The previous night's conversation had not gone well, and he could already hear the strain in her voice before even pressing play. He clicked on the message. "John, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. You're hardly ever home anymore, and when you are, you're either distracted or too tired to even talk. I don't want to be just another obligation on your list. I need more than this. I need you, and I don't know if you even realize that." The words hit him like a cold splash of water. John closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, the guilt welling up inside him. He had tried to convince himself that Claire would understand. He told himself that the long hours and constant focus on the dealership were temporary, that once things settled down, he'd have more time for her. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. The dealership was changing at lightning speed, and it was all-consuming. The more he tried to meet Elon's high expectations, the more he distanced himself from the people who mattered most. Claire was right. He wasn't present, and the consequences of that were now staring him in the face. John leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had promised Claire that they'd talk more, but he didn't know how to fix what was broken. The pressure at work was suffocating, and the strain on his marriage was becoming unbearable. He felt like he was being pulled in two different directions, each one demanding more than he had to give. The next morning, John arrived at the dealership early, hoping to catch up on some work before the day's meetings began. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep juggling everything, but he knew he had to try. The dealership needed him to succeed, and Elon was counting on him to lead the team through the transition. As he stepped into the showroom, he was greeted by the usual bustle of activity. The sales team was already at work, but the atmosphere was different today. There was a palpable sense of unease hanging in the air. Rick was standing in the middle of the showroom, talking to a customer, but his body language was tense, his words sharp. John could see the frustration written all over Rick's face. His eyes narrowed when he saw John approach. "Is there a problem, Rick?" John asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Rick glanced up at him, his jaw clenched. "Yeah, there's a problem. The new sales system is a joke. I've got customers walking out because they think we're not trying to sell them anything. We need to go back to what works." John's patience was starting to wear thin. He had tried to be understanding, but the constant resistance from Rick and others was wearing him down. "Rick, we've been over this. The new system is what we need to do to stay competitive in the future. You can't just keep pushing customers to close a deal on the spot. It's about building relationships, not just making a sale." Rick scoffed. "Relationships don't pay the bills, John. And neither does standing around asking customers about their feelings. You need to get real about what's going on here." The tension between them was thick. John could feel his frustration rising. He had never been good at managing people who refused to listen, especially when they were as talented as Rick. He knew the stakes were high, but he also knew that if the team didn't get on board with the new direction, everything would fall apart. "We're all in this together, Rick," John said, his voice firm. "Either you get on board with the changes, or we're going to have a serious conversation about your future here." Rick didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned and walked away without another word. John stood there for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. The encounter left him feeling drained. He had always prided himself on his leadership abilities, but now it felt like he was losing control. As the day wore on, John's stress level only increased. The morning's confrontation with Rick was just the tip of the iceberg. The team's resistance was becoming more pronounced, and the pressure from Elon was never-ending. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he didn't turn things around soon, he would lose everything: his job, his team, and even Claire. By the time the afternoon rolled around, Elon arrived for his usual visit. John had hoped for some respite, maybe even a break from the relentless demands, but it was clear from the moment Elon stepped into the showroom that there would be no reprieve. "John," Elon greeted him, his voice cool but authoritative. "How's everything going?" John took a deep breath and forced a smile, though he could feel the exhaustion weighing on him. "It's going as well as can be expected. The team's still adjusting to the changes. There's some resistance, but we're working through it." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Resistance? We don't have time for resistance, John. The market is moving fast, and if we don't stay ahead of the curve, we'll get left behind." John's throat tightened. He knew Elon was right, but the constant pressure was starting to break him. "I'm doing my best, Elon, but it's not just about pushing the team harder. They need to believe in the vision. If we don't get them on board, none of this will work." Elon's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then you'd better figure out how to get them on board, John. This dealership's future depends on it." The word stung. It wasn't the first time Elon had put such pressure on him, and John knew it wouldn't be the last. But this time, it felt different. The weight of his personal and professional struggles was beginning to push him to the edge. As Elon turned to leave, John felt a sense of dread settle in his chest. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep up the facade of control. His team was fracturing, his marriage was slipping through his fingers, and Elon's expectations seemed impossible to meet. The road ahead was murky, and John couldn't see a clear way out. All he knew was that if he didn't find a way to regain control, he might lose everything. John walked into his office with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Elon's visit had left him rattled, and the tension with Rick and the team was becoming unbearable. As he closed the door behind him, he slumped into his chair, rubbing his temples in frustration. The pressure was taking its toll, both on his work and on his personal life. Claire's voice from last night still echoed in his mind, and every time he thought about it, a knot tightened in his chest. He knew he was losing her, but he didn't know how to fix it. He had always been someone who could handle stress, someone who thrived under pressure. But now, with everything falling apart around him, he felt like he was drowning. The dealership was in turmoil, his team was fractured, and his marriage was hanging by a thread. Just then, his phone buzzed again. It was Claire. His heart skipped a beat. He had been putting off responding to her messages all day, but he couldn't avoid it any longer. With a deep breath, he tapped the screen and opened the message. "John, I can't keep doing this. I need you to decide. You can't keep living in this limbo. It's not fair to either of us." The words hit him hard, and for a moment, he felt paralyzed. He couldn't let this be the end, not when he had so much more to fight for. His mind raced. There had to be a way to fix this, to save both his career and his relationship. But how? Suddenly, a knock at the door broke his train of thought. John quickly wiped his face, trying to shake off the emotions that had overtaken him. "Come in," he called, his voice steady but strained. The door opened and Anna, his assistant, walked in, holding a file in her hands. She had been working with him for years, and she knew him well enough to sense when something was off. She raised an eyebrow as she stepped inside, but didn't say anything about the tension in the room. Instead, she handed him the file. "I think you'll want to see this," Anna said quietly, glancing at him with concern. John took the file from her and opened it. Inside was a proposal from a competitor dealership that had been looking to expand its operations. It was an aggressive offer, one that included a potential buyout of luxury drive motors. The offer was tempting, especially with the kind of financial backing the competitor had. But as he read through the details, something gnawed at him. "Is this serious?" John asked, looking up from the file. Anna nodded. "They've been circling for a while now. This is their formal proposal. It's a lot of money, John. And if things don't improve here, it could be a real option for the dealership." John stared at the document, his mind racing. A buyout was the last thing he wanted, but he couldn't deny that it was becoming an increasingly viable option. The dealership's future under Elon's leadership was uncertain, and his team was growing more resistant by the day. If he didn't do something soon, they might be forced into a position where a sale was their only choice. But John wasn't ready to give up yet. Not on the dealership and not on himself. "Thanks, Anna," John said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. "I'll think about it. But I need you to keep this quiet for now. We're not making any decisions until I've had some time to process this." Anna gave him a sympathetic look before nodding and turning to leave. "Take care of yourself, John," she said softly, closing the door behind her. John sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision ahead of him pressing down harder than ever. The proposal from the competitor was tempting, but it would mean giving up on everything he had worked for. The dealership, his career, his team. All of it would be gone, replaced by corporate bureaucracy and the cold, impersonal nature of a big business takeover. But could he really keep fighting? Could he continue leading this team when they were so divided? The cracks in the foundation were growing wider, and John wasn't sure how much longer he could hold everything together. Later that afternoon, John found himself in the conference room with the management team, trying to push through another strategy meeting. Elon's demands had only grown more intense, and the pressure was becoming suffocating. He could feel the tension in the room as everyone sat around the table, waiting for him to speak. "All right, team," John said, trying to maintain a calm demeanor despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "We've got to get on the same page here. Elon's expecting results, and I know some of you are still struggling with the new approach. But this is the way forward. We have to make it work." Rick, as usual, was quick to speak up. "Make it work? We've been trying to make it work, John. But the customers aren't responding. They want a quick deal, not some emotional connection. We're losing sales because of all this fluff." John's patience was wearing thin, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Rick, I get it. I know it's frustrating, but we have to think long-term. This is about building loyalty. The old way of selling cars, pushing customers to close a deal, won't cut it anymore. We need to evolve." Rick shot him a glare. "Maybe you're fine with changing the entire way we do business, but I'm not. I'm here to sell cars, not make friends." The words hit John harder than he expected. He had been trying so hard to make the changes work, but it seemed like Rick wasn't the only one who wasn't on board. The rest of the team was silent, unsure of how to respond. The atmosphere in the room felt tense and uneasy, and John realized he was losing control. "All right, that's enough," John said, his voice firm but tired. "I know this is hard. It's hard for me too. But we don't have a choice. If we don't start adapting, we're going to fall behind. I need all of you to commit to this vision. We either do this together, or we don't do it at all." The room was silent for a long moment. The weight of his words hung in the air, and John couldn't tell if the team was truly listening or if they were just waiting for him to back down. He was so close to cracking under the pressure, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. Finally, Anna broke the silence, her voice calm and steady. "John, I know it's been tough, but you've been leading us through this. Maybe it's time to take a step back and think about what's really important here. What do you want to fight for?" Her words hung in the air like a lifeline. John took a deep breath, his mind racing. Was it time to give up on the dream of transforming the dealership? Or was there another way forward? As the meeting ended, John felt a flicker of hope. Anna's words had resonated with him in a way he hadn't expected. Maybe it wasn't about holding on to the status quo or blindly pushing forward with Elon's vision. Maybe it was about finding balance between the changes he was trying to implement, the needs of the team, and the future of his personal life. John didn't know what the answer was yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do it alone. And maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward that didn't involve giving up on everything he had worked so hard to build. As he walked out of the conference room, he realized that the road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like there might be a path forward after all. The following days at Luxury Drive Motors were a whirlwind. John was no longer sure which was worse, dealing with the fractures within his team or navigating the relentless pressure from Elon. But something in him had shifted. Anna's words had sparked a realization. Maybe he didn't have to do this alone. Maybe, just maybe, there was an ally in the most unexpected place. As the team's tensions mounted, John started to notice subtle signs of discontent from other team members besides Rick. There was Sarah, the quiet but talented salesperson who had been with the dealership for years. She had always kept her head down and worked hard, but lately, her usual enthusiasm seemed to be waning. And then there was David, the service manager, who had become more withdrawn in meetings and had started questioning some of the changes in private conversations. John knew he had to address the situation soon before it got worse. But, at the same time, there was one thing he couldn't shake: the nagging thought about the proposal from the competitor dealership. A buyout seemed like the easy way out, but was it the right choice? He wasn't sure if he was running out of options, or if he simply needed to believe in something again. One afternoon, as John sat in his office sifting through paperwork, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't Anna. It was Rick. Rick didn't look angry or defiant as he had in previous days. Instead, there was an unusual quietness to him, a hint of uncertainty that John hadn't seen before. "Rick, what's going on?" John asked, trying to sound as casual as possible, though he couldn't help but be curious about the change in Rick's demeanor. Rick hesitated before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day about the vision and all that. I haven't been fair to you, or to the changes you're trying to make. I guess I've been fighting it because I didn't see the point. But maybe I've been wrong." John looked at him, surprised. This wasn't the Rick he knew, the guy who would rather argue than listen. "You're saying you're willing to give it a shot?" Rick nodded slowly. "Yeah, I can see now that the old way isn't gonna cut it anymore. And you've been trying to do something good here. Maybe I haven't been the best team player, but I'm ready to try something different." For the dealership, John wasn't sure what to make of Rick's sudden change of heart, but a part of him felt relief. If Rick was willing to buy in, maybe there was a way to turn things around. "I appreciate that, Rick. I really do. It's going to take all of us working together, but if you're on board, that means a lot." Rick gave a small, almost apologetic nod before leaving the room. John sat there for a moment, stunned. Could this really be the turning point he had been hoping for? The following day, the dealership had its weekly team meeting. For the first time in a while, John entered the conference room with a sense of cautious optimism. He could feel the subtle shift in the room when he walked in. The air felt less tense, less combative. Even Rick seemed calmer. As the meeting progressed, John addressed the team with a new approach. He didn't try to push them too hard, didn't try to sell them on the vision as if it was the final answer to all their problems. Instead, he acknowledged the challenges they were facing and focused on finding common ground. "I know these changes have been tough on all of you," John began, his tone sincere, "but I want you to understand that we're all in this together. I'm not expecting perfection overnight, and I'm not here to fight you. I want to listen. Let's find a way forward that works for everyone." The room was quiet for a moment. John could see the skepticism in their eyes, but there was also something else: hope. Hope that they could still make this work. It was then that Sarah spoke up. Her voice, usually soft and reserved, carried a sense of determination. "Maybe we've been too focused on what isn't working," she said. "But we've got a lot of great things here already. Maybe we need to start small. Focus on the little wins before we try to change everything at once." John looked at her, a feeling of gratitude swelling inside him. "That's exactly what we need, Sarah. Let's start small and build from there." And then, to his surprise, David chimed in. "I think I can work with that. I've been seeing more interest in our services since we started offering the new tech upgrades. We should lean into that more." John felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in days: hope. Maybe they weren't so far off from making this work after all. That afternoon, after the meeting, John sat in his office and reflected on the day's progress. The team had listened to him. They hadn't fully embraced the vision yet, but they were at least willing to give it a try. That was more than he had expected. Maybe they could make this work, but it was going to take time. His phone buzzed again. It was Anna, and this time it was a message. "John, I've been thinking. There's something important you need to know. I overheard something earlier today that could change everything. Call me when you get a chance." John's heart skipped a beat. He quickly grabbed the phone and called her. "Anna, what's going on?" he asked, his voice tight with curiosity. "I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I overheard a conversation between Elon and one of the board members," Anna said, her voice low. "They're seriously considering pulling the plug on the whole transformation plan. They've been talking about selling the dealership." John froze. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. A buyout. It was real. And it was closer than he thought. They're looking at offers from outside investors, Anna continued. And from what I've gathered, it's almost a done deal. They think things are moving too slowly and that a sale is the best option. John's mind raced. He had known that the competitor's proposal was a serious threat, but he hadn't realized how close they were to making a decision. The thought of losing the dealership, of everything he had worked for, was unbearable. He had to act fast. The next morning, John was at the dealership earlier than usual. He was determined to make one last effort to save the business, his career, and his team. He called a meeting with the entire management team and Anna. "Listen up, everyone," he said, his voice firm but filled with urgency. "I just learned something that could change everything. Elon is seriously considering selling the dealership. They think the transformation isn't happening fast enough, and they've got investors waiting in the wings." The room went quiet as the weight of the news settled over them. John saw the fear in their eyes. The fear of losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their sense of purpose. But there was also something else in their eyes, resolve. This wasn't the end. Not if they could do something about it. "We're not giving up," John said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "We're going to fight for this dealership, for our future. We've got to show Elon that we can make this work, and we're going to do it together." The team looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, John saw a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Maybe they could turn this around. Maybe, just maybe, they had one last chance to save everything they had built. But it was going to take everything they had, and they had to move fast. The clock was ticking. The following morning, John felt the weight of the situation more heavily than ever. The news about Elon's contemplation of a buyout had sent shockwaves through the dealership. The thought of losing everything he had worked for, the dealership, his team, his career, was nearly unbearable. But amidst the mounting pressure, John knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let it end like this. Not without a fight. He stood in front of the mirror in his office, taking a deep breath. This was the moment. The moment to prove that everything he had done up until now wasn't for nothing. He had a plan, and it was a risky one. But in moments like this, it was the bold decisions that made the difference. John wasn't sure how much time he had left to turn things around, but he wasn't going down without giving it everything he had. By 9 a.m., John had called for an emergency meeting with his management team and Anna. It was crucial that everyone was on the same page if they were going to stand a chance at saving the dealership. When they all gathered in the conference room, John could see the anxiety written on their faces, but there was also a sense of determination in their eyes. "All right, everyone," John began, his voice steady but firm. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're in serious trouble. Elon and the board are considering selling the dealership. They don't think the transformation plan is working fast enough. We don't have much time." There was a collective gasp in the room. It was clear that the team hadn't fully understood the gravity of the situation until now. "But here's the thing," John continued, looking each person in the eye. "I believe in this team. I believe in what we're building here. I believe in the vision we've started to create. And I'm not going to let that go without a fight." The room fell silent. He could see the skepticism on some faces, but also the hope that his words had ignited. John was their leader, and if they were going to save this place, they needed him to lead them through it. Anna spoke up first. "What do we need to do, John?" John's eyes narrowed as he thought through his plan. "We need to show Elon that we can make this work. We need to prove that we're capable of adapting, of delivering results without compromising on the vision. We need to start showing customers that Luxury Drive Motors isn't just a place to buy cars. It's a place that truly cares about their experience. But more importantly, we need to show Elon that this is worth fighting for." Rick crossed his arms, looking skeptical. "And how do we do that? We've been pushing for this transformation for months, and the customers aren't responding." John didn't back down. "We need to change our approach. We need to be smarter about how we're connecting with customers, how we're telling our story. We need to show them that we're different, not just in how we sell, but in how we listen. We're going to revamp our marketing strategy, focus more on customer satisfaction, and use our unique selling points to our advantage. And most importantly, we're going to give it everything we've got." Rick didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue either. John knew this wouldn't be easy, but if they were going to make it work, they needed everyone to be on board. We've got to act fast, John continued. We don't have the luxury of waiting around to see if things improve. If we want to stop this buyout from happening, we need to show Elon that we can turn things around. Today, tomorrow, and the next day. It's all or nothing. Anna nodded. I'll start working on a new marketing campaign. We'll highlight the things that make us stand out, the things that make luxury drive motors different from every other dealership. John turned to Sarah and David. I need you to rally the sales team. We need to refocus on customer engagement, building trust, and creating lasting relationships. Show them that we care about more than just making the sale. Sarah, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, spoke up. I'll make sure everyone is on the same page. We'll start pushing for a more personalized experience with every customer. We can do this, David added. I'll make sure the service team is ready to handle an influx of new customers and focus on delivering the best possible experience in the service department. John could see the fire beginning to light in their eyes. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore. It was about saving the dealership and proving that they could overcome any obstacle. But there was still one thing they needed to address. One thing that would be the tipping point in their fight to turn things around. We're going to need to reach out to the community, John said, his voice strong. We need to build relationships with local businesses and get the word out. We need to show Elon that we're not just a dealership, we're an integral part of this community. That's going to be our ace in the hole. The next few days were a blur of activity. The team rallied together in a way John hadn't seen before. Sarah worked tirelessly with the sales team to revamp their approach with customers, focusing on a personalized, human touch that made every customer feel like they were part of the luxury drive motors family. David and his team focused on refining their service processes to make sure every car that went through the shop left in pristine condition, while also ensuring that customers felt heard and appreciated. Meanwhile, Anna worked on a targeted marketing campaign that showcased the dealership's commitment to customer care and satisfaction. They started to feature real customer testimonials, highlighting the personalized experience they offered. They began reaching out to local businesses, offering special deals and creating partnerships that would bring in more foot traffic and spread the word about what made luxury drive motors unique. John knew that this wasn't going to be enough on its own. They needed results, and fast. He had to find a way to prove to Elon that they were making real progress, that the transformation wasn't just a nice idea, but a tangible success. 3 days later, John found himself sitting in Elon's office, the weight of everything riding on this conversation. Elon had agreed to meet with him for an update on the dealership's progress, and this was his chance to make or break the future of luxury drive motors. John took a deep breath before walking in. Elon was sitting behind his massive desk, flipping through a stack of papers. John, good to see you, Elon said, barely looking up. John didn't waste time with pleasantries. Elon, I have some good news. We've been working around the clock, revamping our customer engagement strategy, improving our service department, and building stronger relationships with the community. I can already see a shift in customer response. Elon raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Really? I've been hearing mixed things. Show me what you've got. John didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and showed Elon a video. It was a testimonial from a satisfied customer who had purchased a car just the day before. The customer spoke about how the entire experience had felt personal, how they had felt heard, and how the dealership had gone above and beyond in every aspect. The video was short but powerful. Elon watched in silence, his expression unreadable. John's heart pounded in his chest. This is just the beginning, John said, trying to keep his voice steady. We're going to keep building on this momentum. We're not giving up. And I'm confident that if we continue down this path, we'll turn this place around. Elon finally looked up, his eyes narrowing as he processed what John had said. John held his breath, waiting for the response that could change everything. All right, John, Elon said, his tone serious. I'll give you more time, but you'd better make sure you deliver. If things don't improve, we'll have no choice but to sell. John's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the last chance. But at least he had one more shot, and he was going to make it count. We will, John said, his voice unwavering. I won't let you down. As John walked out of Elon's office, He felt a sense of determination unlike anything he had felt in weeks. They still had a long way to go, but he could feel it. The shift had begun. And this time, he was sure they could make it work. But the clock was ticking, and they had to move fast. John had barely made it back to his office when he received a call from Anna. The urgency in her voice was palpable. "John, you need to come to the showroom. Now," she said quickly, before hanging up. John felt a jolt of panic run through him. What now? He didn't waste a second. He grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door, his mind racing with possible worst-case scenarios. What could have gone wrong? As he entered the showroom, he was met by Anna and Sarah, both looking tense. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. Anna pointed toward the front of the dealership, where a group of customers had gathered. There were murmurs of discontent, and John could sense the unease in the air. He walked closer and overheard a few snippets of conversation. "I can't believe this. They promised us a much better experience," one of the customers said. Another added, "I've been here for hours, and no one's even bothered to check on us. What kind of service is this?" John's heart sank. He knew this was the kind of situation that could spiral out of control if not handled properly. "Anna, Sarah, what happened?" John asked, his mind working to figure out the source of the issue. "We've been having a few glitches in the new system we're using for customer engagement," Sarah explained, her voice apologetic. "It's been causing delays, and a few customers were frustrated by it. We're trying to make it right, but it's not looking good." John ran a hand through his hair. This was the last thing they needed. They were already under so much pressure to prove themselves, and now this? But he wasn't about to let this derail everything they had been working toward. "All right," John said, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "Let's fix this. Anna, can you help me smooth things over with the customers? Sarah, I need you to work with the tech team to get this system running smoothly. If we can't do it today, we'll have to come up with a workaround." As he turned to face the customers, he tried to keep his composure, though he could feel the weight of their eyes on him. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, the manager here. I understand that things haven't been going smoothly today, and for that, I sincerely apologize. We are working hard to fix the issues, and I can assure you that we're committed to providing the best service possible. I know it's frustrating, but we appreciate your patience as we resolve these problems." The group was quiet for a moment, their frustration still apparent. But John didn't give up. He walked around, speaking to each customer individually, listening to their concerns, and offering solutions. It wasn't just about fixing the immediate problem. It was about showing these customers that they were more than just transactions to him. They were people, and their experience mattered. After several minutes, the mood began to shift. Some of the customers softened, nodding in understanding. Others smiled, appreciating the attention to their concerns. One by one, they began to leave the showroom, satisfied with John's response. As the last customer walked out, Anna came up to John, a relieved smile on her face. "That went better than I thought it would," she said, still catching her breath. "Thanks for stepping in," John replied. "We need to fix this, though. We can't afford another situation like this." Just then, Sarah approached with an update. "The tech team is working on the issue. We've identified the glitch in the new system, and they're doing a patch right now. It should be sorted out within the next couple of hours." John nodded, but the relief he felt was short-lived. They had dodged a bullet today, but this was just one of many obstacles they'd face moving forward. There was no time to rest. The next few days were a blur of relentless work. The glitches with the customer engagement system were patched, but there were still kinks in their new approach that needed to be ironed out. The team worked tirelessly to keep the dealership running smoothly, and while some days felt like small victories, there was a constant undercurrent of tension. But then, just when John thought things might stabilize, another bombshell hit. It was late one evening when he received a call from Elon. He didn't even have to say anything. John could tell from the tone of Elon's voice that this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "John, we need to talk," Elon said, his voice clipped. "I've been hearing about some of the issues at the dealership. I've been patient, but I need to see results, and I need to see them fast. This whole transformation thing, it's not working the way I expected. If things don't improve soon, I'll have no choice but to move forward with the sale." John's stomach churned. He had known this moment was coming, but hearing Elon say it aloud made it feel all the more real. He couldn't lose this dealership. Not now. Not after everything they had fought for. I understand, Elon, John said, trying to keep his voice calm. But I'm telling you, we're making progress. We're working through the challenges, and I believe we can turn this around. Just give us a little more time. I'm confident we'll see the results soon. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Elon responded. You've got one more chance, John. If I don't see substantial improvement by next week, the sale is happening. And I don't want to hear any more excuses. The line went dead before John could respond. He stood there, staring at the phone, his mind racing. One more chance. One more chance to prove that they could make this work. He took a deep breath and set the phone down on his desk. He wasn't going to let this be the end. Not if he could help it. The team rallied together once more. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Sarah pushed the sales team harder, encouraging them to get more creative in their approaches. David worked around the clock with the service team to ensure that every single customer had the best experience possible. Anna and John worked on a new community outreach plan, focusing on building more local partnerships to increase foot traffic and brand visibility. But despite all the hard work, the pressure was mounting. John couldn't shake the feeling that the clock was ticking down. The weight of Elon's ultimatum loomed over him like a shadow. Every decision, every action felt like it could be the one that either made or broke their future. By the end of the week, they had made progress. But was it enough? Would it be enough to convince Elon to give them the time they needed to truly turn things around? John wasn't sure, but he knew this. He couldn't give up now. The future of luxury drive motors depended on what happened in the next few days, and he wasn't going to go down without a fight. John had never felt more conflicted. The tension was unbearable. Every day felt like it could be their last at luxury drive motors. Despite their tireless efforts to overhaul their strategies, it seemed like something always stood in the way of their success. They'd overcome small issues, sure, but the looming threat of Elon's ultimatum was always hanging over them, like a sword just waiting to fall. But something in the air shifted. It started with a call from Sarah, her voice brimming with excitement. "John, you've got to hear this," she said, barely able to contain her enthusiasm. "We had a customer come in today, a repeat buyer, who's been a bit tough on us before. He walked in, said he was ready to buy, no questions asked. And get this, he said the main reason he's back is because he's noticed the change. He said we're doing something different, that we're finally listening to our customers the way we should have been all along." John felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. It was small, but it was something. "That's incredible," he replied, his mind racing. "Do you think this could be the start of something bigger? Maybe customers are starting to see the difference." Sarah's voice softened as she spoke. "I think so. It's still early, but word of mouth is starting to spread. The community outreach program is catching on, and we're starting to get more foot traffic. People are noticing that we're not just selling cars, we're offering an experience." John let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Maybe, just maybe, they were turning the corner. The following days were a whirlwind. John and the team kept their foot on the gas pedal, refusing to let up. The small successes began to snowball. The dealership saw more customers than it had in weeks, and the service department's reputation for quality and care was starting to grow. The focus on customer relationships began paying dividends, and slowly but surely, their efforts were being noticed. But nothing could shake the looming deadline hanging over their heads. John knew that their time was running out, and that the progress they'd made so far might not be enough to satisfy Elon. One afternoon, as John was reviewing the dealership's metrics with Anna, he got an unexpected call. It was Elon. "John, I've been getting some positive reports about the dealership," Elon said, his tone guarded but with a hint of approval. "It seems like things are turning around, but you know I don't take promises on faith. I need to see tangible results. Can you prove to me that this is really working?" John's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. "Absolutely," John replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We've seen a noticeable uptick in foot traffic, customer satisfaction is at an all-time high, and our service team is getting rave reviews. I'm confident that we can show you that the transformation is working. Just give us a bit more time." Elon was quiet for a moment. John could practically hear the wheels turning on the other end of the line. All right, Elon said finally. I'll be in town next week. Let's see if the progress is as real as you say. I'm giving you until then. If I'm not convinced, the sale will go through. John's stomach churned. The clock was ticking, but at least now, they had a glimmer of hope. We'll be ready, John said firmly. Thank you, Elon. As the call ended, John sat back in his chair, a weight lifting off his shoulders. But the truth was, the real test was still ahead. He didn't have the luxury of relaxing. They had 1 week to prove that luxury drive motors could thrive on its own, and he would do whatever it took to make sure that happened. The next week was a blur of activity. John and his team worked around the clock to fine-tune every aspect of the dealership. Sarah pushed the sales team harder, ensuring that they were focusing on creating deep, meaningful connections with every customer who walked through the door. David's service team went above and beyond to deliver outstanding customer service, leaving customers with a sense of loyalty they hadn't had before. Anna worked with the marketing team to create an exciting new promotional campaign to further boost visibility. Each day, John saw more and more evidence that they were on the right track. Their customer engagement was higher than ever, and the dealership's reviews were reflecting that. But even though things were improving, there was still one thing they needed to prove to Elon. Real, measurable, undeniable results. On the day Elon was scheduled to visit, the dealership was bustling. The team had worked tirelessly to get everything ready, making sure that the showroom was spotless, the cars were polished, and that everyone was ready for a customer experience that would exceed even Elon's high standards. As Elon walked through the front door that morning, John could see the sharp, calculating look in his eyes. The man was a master of business, and he wasn't going to be easily swayed by any half measures. John had prepared for this moment his entire career. This was it, the moment that could define the future of luxury drive motors. John, Elon said, extending a hand. I've heard some good things. Let's see if the hype is justified. John shook Elon's hand firmly, doing his best to mask his nervousness. We've worked hard for this moment, Elon. I'm confident you'll see the progress we've made. Over the next few hours, John gave Elon a tour of the dealership, showcasing the improvements that had been made. He walked him through the newly streamlined customer service processes, the revamped sales floor, and the newly launched community outreach programs. The team did everything they could to demonstrate how far they had come. As they reached the showroom floor, John noticed Elon's eyes light up when he saw a newly designed display that featured customer testimonials. It was a simple but powerful display that showed real customers sharing their stories about how luxury drive motors had changed their car buying experience. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Elon stood in front of the display, taking it all in. I have to admit, John, he said, turning to face him, I'm impressed. This is exactly what I needed to see. It looks like you've really turned things around. John allowed himself a breath of relief. But he wasn't finished yet. We're not stopping here, he said, his voice resolute. This is just the beginning. We're going to keep improving, keep innovating, and keep giving our customers the best experience we possibly can. Elon nodded thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing as if weighing his next words. Finally, he spoke. I'll admit, I wasn't sure at first, but you've shown me that you're capable of more than I expected. I'm not ready to sell just yet. You've earned more time, but this is the last chance. Keep this up, and you'll have a future here. John's heart leaped in his chest. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was the break they needed. Thank you, Elon, John said, a sense of relief washing over him. We won't let you down. As Elon left the dealership, John stood there for a moment, taking it all in. It wasn't over yet, but they had made it through the hardest part. The battle wasn't won, but it had been a significant victory. And in that moment, John realized something important. No matter how high the stakes, no matter how impossible it seemed, when a team came together and fought for something they believed in, there was always hope. Now, it was time to prove that hope could turn into success. The following days were both a relief and a heavy burden. While Elon had given John more time, the pressure was far from over. John knew that he had bought himself some time, but he was still far from securing the dealership's future. Every decision, every meeting, Every customer interaction now had the weight of Elon's expectations hanging over it. John's mornings were filled with meetings and updates. He was constantly monitoring the dealership's performance, tweaking their strategies, and managing the team. It was exhausting, but necessary. The clock was still ticking, and next week's final assessment was looming large in his mind. But amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of something. John started to notice the subtle signs of improvement: loyal customers returning, the service department getting glowing reviews, and most importantly, the sales numbers slowly creeping up. It wasn't the explosive growth they'd hoped for, but it was progress. Real progress. On one particularly busy day, Sarah approached him with a report. "John, I think you should see this," she said, handing him a printed sheet of paper. It was a report on customer satisfaction, one that showed a marked increase in positive feedback. The dealership had started receiving recognition on local review sites, and the customer retention rate had improved significantly. John raised an eyebrow, surprised at the figures. "This is good, really good, but we need more of this. We can't afford to rest on our laurels now." Sarah nodded. "I agree. We need to keep pushing, but I'm starting to see real loyalty from our customers. They're coming back for the experience, not just the cars." John smiled, feeling a small spark of hope light within him. If they could build on this, they might just make it. Later that week, as John was walking through the showroom, checking on the team, he overheard a conversation between two customers. "I heard this place was under new management," one of them said. "I've got to say, I was skeptical at first, but I'm really impressed with how things have changed." The other customer nodded. "Yeah, the service is great. They really seem to care about what we need, not just about making a sale." John stood back, watching the interaction with a sense of pride. It was working. People were noticing. But just as he felt a sense of accomplishment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The name on the screen made his heart race. Elon Musk. "Hello, Elon?" John answered, trying to sound casual, though his mind was anything but. "Elon, I wanted to give you an update." Elon's voice came through the line, sounding even more businesslike than usual. "I'm coming into town tomorrow for a final walkthrough. I need to see if the improvements are more than just surface level. I'll be at the dealership around noon." John's stomach sank. This was it. The final test. Elon had been watching from afar, and now he was going to see firsthand if the dealership's turnaround was for real. "We'll be ready," John said, keeping his voice steady. As soon as the call ended, John's mind began racing. He immediately called a meeting with his team. "All right, team," he said, standing in front of them. "Elon's coming tomorrow. We've made great progress, but this is the final hurdle. We need to show him that the changes we've made are more than just cosmetic. It's about the experience, the customer care, the attention to detail. We've come too far to let it slip now." Everyone in the room nodded, their faces determined. "We've got this," Sarah said. "We're all in this together." The next day, the dealership was buzzing with anticipation. John was on edge, but he couldn't let it show. Elon was due to arrive at noon, and they had to be prepared for anything. John walked the showroom floor one last time, making sure everything was perfect. Every car was polished, every customer interaction was smooth, and the team was ready to go. When Elon arrived, he didn't waste any time. He walked through the showroom, asking questions about the new processes, the customer feedback, and the changes they'd made. John walked with him, explaining the efforts they'd put into customer service, the new marketing strategies, and the ways they had engaged with the community. At one point, Elon stopped and turned to John, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, John," Elon said, his voice flat, "do you think this is enough? Can you truly sustain this progress, or is this just a temporary improvement?" John swallowed, feeling the weight of the question. "It's enough," he replied confidently. "We're committed to this. The team is on board, the customers are responding, and the numbers are showing it. We're not stopping here. We're going to keep pushing to make this dealership the best it's ever been." Elon paused for a long moment, his eyes scanning the showroom floor. John could feel the tension in the air, the weight of Elon's decision pressing down on him. Finally, Elon spoke again. "I've been keeping track of the progress. I've seen the reviews. The numbers are better. I'll give you credit for that." John's heart skipped a beat. But Elon continued, I'm still not convinced this will last. You're showing progress, but I need more. This needs to be sustainable. Can you prove to me that this transformation isn't just a phase? John took a deep breath. Yes, Elon. I'm confident that we've laid the foundation for long-term success. We've changed the way we do business here, and we're committed to keeping it that way. Elon nodded slowly, his expression still inscrutable. All right, John. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to be watching. Make sure this is the beginning of something permanent, or I'll walk away. John held his breath. This was it, the chance he had worked so hard for. You won't regret it, he said firmly. As Elon left the dealership, John let out a long sigh of relief. The pressure hadn't eased, but for the first time in weeks, he felt like they might actually pull this off. Elon was still skeptical, but at least he had given them more time. And more importantly, he had acknowledged the changes they had made. John gathered his team for a quick debrief. We've got more time, but we're not out of the woods yet, he said. We need to keep pushing. We've earned this chance, but now we need to prove that we can maintain it. The team was energized. They had made it through the toughest test yet, but they knew the road ahead would still be challenging. They had to keep up the momentum, stay focused, and ensure that the transformation was more than just a temporary fix. It wasn't over, but John was finally starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following Elon's visit were a mix of triumph and anxiety. John could feel the tension in the air, both within the dealership and in his own mind. Elon had given them more time, but the truth was, the dealership's future still hung in the balance. If they couldn't sustain the progress they had made, all of their hard work would be for nothing. John spent sleepless nights poring over financials, meeting with his management team, and analyzing every aspect of the dealership's operation. He couldn't afford to lose momentum, but as much as he tried to stay on top of things, a sense of unease kept gnawing at him. Could they really maintain the improvements they had shown in such a short time? Could they keep their customers coming back for more? It wasn't long before those questions turned into a new set of challenges. The dealership's reputation was growing, but so was the competition. Word had spread about the changes at Luxury Drive Motors, and other dealerships in town were starting to take notice. The pressure was mounting from all sides. They couldn't afford to lose the edge they had fought so hard to gain. One morning, as John was sitting at his desk, going over the latest sales numbers, his phone rang. It was Sarah. John, we've got a situation, Sarah said, her voice tense. I just got off the phone with one of our biggest suppliers. They're pulling back on inventory, saying they can't guarantee supply at the levels we've been getting. John's heart skipped a beat. The supply chain had been a delicate issue ever since the dealership had made its transformation, and any disruption in inventory could lead to a domino effect that would hurt their ability to meet customer demand. How bad is it? John asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Bad. They're cutting back on a lot of the models we've been selling the most. If we can't secure additional inventory, we'll have a major shortage by the end of next month. John sat back in his chair, staring at the phone. This wasn't just a minor hiccup, it was a potential disaster. If they couldn't get the cars they needed to satisfy customers, they risked undoing all the goodwill they had built. What's the plan? John asked, forcing his mind into problem-solving mode. I'm reaching out to other suppliers, but it might take some time. We'll need to make sure we don't lose customers in the meantime. We'll need to get creative with the cars we do have in stock, Sarah replied. All right, John said, his mind working at full speed. Let's figure this out. We can't afford to lose customers now. Over the next few days, Sarah and the sales team scrambled to find alternative solutions. They worked hard to keep customers engaged, offering special incentives, trade-in deals, and even expanded test drive options for the models that were still available. But despite their best efforts, the shortage was beginning to take a toll. The foot traffic was still good, but customers were starting to walk away without purchasing, frustrated by the limited options. John watched the growing frustration in the showroom with a sinking feeling. He could see the pressure building, both on his team and himself. Every sale that fell through felt like a blow, and with each passing day, The urgency to fix the problem intensified. As if things weren't complicated enough, John received another unexpected call. This time, it was from Elon. "I've been hearing some troubling things about your inventory situation," Elon said, his tone cold. "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the idea of a dealership that can't guarantee the cars customers want." John's stomach dropped. He had known that this was coming. The supply issues had become too significant to ignore. "We're addressing it, Elon," John said, his voice tight. "We're working with multiple suppliers to secure more inventory. I know this is a critical issue, but I assure you we're doing everything we can to make sure we don't lose customers." Elon was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was laced with concern. "I'm giving you some leeway here, John, but you need to understand that we can't afford to have this drag on. If customers can't get the cars they want, we'll lose them, and that's a death sentence for any business." John swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Elon's words. "I understand, Elon. We're on it. I promise you, we'll get this resolved." But as he hung up, the weight of the conversation didn't leave him. He knew that if they didn't fix this issue soon, it wouldn't just be the end of their customer relationships. It could also be the end of their chance to prove themselves to Elon. By the end of the week, John was working around the clock to find solutions. Sarah had managed to secure a few backup suppliers, but their prices were higher, and it would take some time before new stock arrived. In the meantime, the dealership continued to run low on inventory, and more customers were walking away empty-handed. John was losing sleep. The stress was becoming unbearable. They had made so much progress, but it felt like everything was starting to unravel. The dealership had gone from being a symbol of hope and reinvention to a business that was teetering on the edge of disaster. The clock was ticking, and Elon's deadline was getting closer with each passing day. One evening, as John sat in his office, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Anna. "John, I think we need to talk. Can you meet me in the showroom?" Without hesitation, John grabbed his coat and headed downstairs to meet her. When he arrived, Anna was standing in the center of the showroom, her expression serious. "John, I've been thinking," she began, pacing in front of him. "We've been so focused on customer service, on pushing sales, and keeping up with everything that I think we've overlooked something critical." John frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been talking to some of our employees," Anna continued, "and I think we're spreading ourselves too thin. The team is getting burned out. The pressure to meet Elon's expectations, plus dealing with the inventory issues. People are starting to lose their motivation." John's chest tightened. This wasn't something he had considered, but it made sense. The team had been running on fumes for weeks, juggling multiple issues and trying to fix problems as they arose. "Do you think we can afford to slow down?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're already behind on inventory, and I can't risk that kind of delay." Anna paused for a moment, looking at him with a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to be smart about this. We can't fix everything at once. Maybe it's time we focused on what we can control and don't overpromise what we can't deliver. Let's step back, regroup, and create a solid plan for the long term." John felt a weight lift off his shoulders, but a new one settled in its place. The pressure was still there, but Anna's words felt like a lifeline. He knew that the key to surviving this challenge wasn't just about pushing harder. It was about being strategic, focusing on the right things, and pacing themselves for the marathon ahead. As the weekend approached, John called another meeting with his management team. He took a deep breath and laid out a new approach. They would continue to work hard, but they would also take a step back and focus on the most pressing issues: inventory, customer retention, and ensuring that their core team didn't burn out. "We need to prove to Elon that we're capable of maintaining this change, not just for a few weeks, but for the long haul," John said. "And that starts with taking care of the people who've gotten us this far." The team nodded in agreement, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging, but with the right focus, they could still make it. The stakes had never been higher, but for the first time in days, John felt like they had a fighting chance. They weren't done yet, not by a long shot, but John was starting to believe that they could make it. The week following John's realization that they needed to focus on long-term strategy rather than immediate fixes was a turning point. There was still pressure in the air, but the atmosphere inside the dealership was different. It was as if a collective breath had been taken by the team, giving them the clarity they needed to move forward. John started his mornings earlier, spending time with the staff, checking in with every department to ensure that everyone understood the new approach. It was clear that the team was starting to feel the shift in mentality. Instead of scrambling to keep up with every challenge, they began to focus on what they could control. Sarah and the sales team spent time learning the ins and outs of the limited inventory they had left, honing their customer interactions to highlight the benefits of the available models. Meanwhile, Anna worked closely with the service department to make sure they were running smoothly, knowing that providing the best service possible could be a differentiator when inventory was low. But as much as they tried to hold it together, the reality of the situation was that the dealership was still operating at a significant disadvantage. The clock was ticking toward Elon's deadline, and inventory was becoming more of a crisis with every passing day. Even as the team's morale improved, John couldn't escape the fact that the odds were stacked against them. One morning, as John sat in his office, reviewing the latest stock levels, he received an unexpected call from a supplier they had never worked with before. "Mr. Ford, I understand you're looking for more inventory. We might be able to help," the voice on the other end of the phone said. John's pulse quickened. "Tell me more." "We're a small but reliable operation. We specialize in getting cars to dealerships in a pinch. If you're interested, we can have a shipment to you in 2 weeks. It'll be a bit more expensive, but we're confident in our ability to deliver." John hesitated. The cost would certainly cut into their profit margins, but it was an opportunity they couldn't afford to ignore. "I'm interested," he replied. "Send me the details." As the supplier's offer was finalized, the team continued to manage the growing tension with a mixture of hard work and optimism. The incoming inventory would provide a temporary solution, but the underlying issue remained. Could they truly sustain the changes they had made? Could they continue to improve the customer experience without becoming overwhelmed? It was a constant balancing act. Every sale, every interaction was a reminder of what was at stake. If they couldn't keep the momentum going, the dealership's future would be in jeopardy, no matter how much inventory they had in stock. Then, the unthinkable happened. It was just a few days before Elon's final assessment, and John was walking through the showroom when he noticed something strange. One of their best salespeople, Mark, was talking animatedly with a customer, but something about the conversation didn't seem right. John walked over to listen, catching snippets of the exchange. "Look, if you're looking for a deal, I'd suggest heading over to Parkview Motors down the street," Mark said, his voice calm but firm. "They've got a larger selection, and you might find exactly what you want there." John froze in his tracks. Parkview Motors was one of their biggest competitors, and now it seemed like one of his own people was steering a customer directly into their hands. "Mark," John called, stepping forward with a mix of anger and disbelief. Mark looked up, startled. The customer, sensing something was wrong, quickly excused himself and left the showroom, leaving John alone with his sales representative. "John, Mark started, but John cut him off. "What the hell is going on?" John's voice was low but fierce. "You're telling a customer to go to a competitor? What happened to all the talk about loyalty, about putting the customer first?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flicking to the floor. "I was just trying to be honest. We don't have the exact model the customer wanted, and I thought it might be better to send them somewhere that could help." John's face hardened. "That's not your decision to make. You don't push customers away, especially when things are as delicate as they are now." Mark remained silent, his eyes still downcast. "You're supposed to be part of this team, Mark," John said, his voice tinged with disappointment. "I'm trying to save this dealership, and we can't afford to have you sending people out the door. If this happens again, we'll have to let you go." Mark nodded silently. He knew it was a warning he couldn't afford to ignore. The encounter with Mark left John shaken. It wasn't just about the potential loss of a sale. It was a sign that the pressure was beginning to crack the team. John had worked so hard to create an environment of collaboration, but now, just when it mattered most, the fractures were starting to show. As John sat back down at his desk, he realized that the gamble they had taken, pouring all their resources into customer experience, hoping that inventory would catch up, was beginning to feel like a fragile house of cards. Every small failure, every moment of doubt, added up to something bigger. The next day, Elon called. John felt a tightness in his chest as the phone rang. "John, it's Elon," came the voice on the other end. "I'm coming in for the final review today. I'll be there in about an hour." John swallowed, trying to keep his composure. "I'll be ready, Elon. We've made improvements, and we're working on addressing the inventory issue." "I expect nothing less," Elon replied coolly before hanging up. As the hour drew closer, John stood in the showroom, mentally preparing for what would be the most important meeting of his life. He had made so many strides, but there was no guarantee that it would be enough. He had put everything on the line: his reputation, his team's trust, and the future of luxury drive motors. And now, with Elon's final decision looming, John knew it was time to make or break. As the showroom doors opened, Elon Musk walked in, his gaze scanning the dealership with a sharpness that cut through the tension. John felt a sudden surge of determination. They had come too far to let it all fall apart now. "Let's see what you've got," Elon said, his voice calm yet firm. John took a deep breath. It was time to show Elon and himself that they could do this. They could make it work. And no matter the outcome, John was determined to fight to the very end. John's heart raced as Elon stepped into the showroom. The familiar scent of new cars, the polished floors, and the bright lights suddenly felt like a pressure cooker, each moment building toward an inevitable explosion. The stakes had never been higher. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of effort, growth, and challenges. But now, this was the ultimate test. Could they prove to Elon that they were worthy of his trust, or would they lose everything? John stood tall as Elon's sharp eyes scanned the showroom floor. There was no mistaking the quiet intensity of Elon's presence. He was a man who didn't suffer mediocrity, and John knew he was about to be judged on every little detail. "Good to see you, Elon," John said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Elon gave him a quick nod, but didn't respond immediately. He began walking slowly through the showroom, taking in the atmosphere, inspecting the cars on display, and watching how the staff interacted with customers. John followed closely behind, his thoughts racing. This was the moment of truth. As Elon made his rounds, John's mind was a whirlwind. His team had done everything they could to prepare, to make sure everything was perfect. The cars were polished, the customer service was top-notch, and the inventory, though still limited, was presented as attractively as possible. Sarah and the sales team had been working non-stop to engage every customer that came in, and the feedback had been overwhelmingly positive. But John knew that Elon wouldn't be satisfied with just a few good reviews. He needed more than that. He needed to see long-term viability. He needed to see that they were capable of maintaining this transformation and building something sustainable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Elon stopped in front of John, his face unreadable. "I've been watching your progress," Elon said, his voice neutral. "There's a noticeable improvement. I'll give you credit for that. But it's not enough." John's heart dropped, and for a moment, the room felt like it was closing in on him. He had expected some skepticism, but the finality in Elon's words struck a chord. The pressure was mounting, and every part of him fought to keep his composure. "Elon," John said, his voice calm but firm, "I know we're not perfect, but I can assure you that we've built a solid foundation. The changes we've made, our approach to customer experience, the loyalty we're building with our clients, those things aren't temporary. We've made this dealership about more than just selling cars. We've made it about creating real value for our customers." Elon gave him a slight nod, but didn't say anything. Instead, he turned to look at the customer service desk, where one of the salespeople was engaging with a couple. John could see Elon's keen eyes examining every detail. After a long pause, Elon finally spoke. "This dealership has potential, John. But potential isn't enough. You've done a lot of work, but what's next? How do you plan to sustain this over time?" John's mind spun. He had known this question was coming, but hearing it from Elon felt like a challenge he couldn't afford to flinch from. "We've focused on customer retention," John said confidently, "building relationships that last, not just chasing the next sale. The new inventory deal we've secured will ensure we don't have a supply problem moving forward. We've established new partnerships with suppliers to keep our selection diverse and competitive." Elon raised an eyebrow. "I see. And what about your team? How do you keep them motivated when the pressure of meeting my expectations continues to mount? John took a deep breath. The team had been working tirelessly, but the strain was starting to show. There was no denying it. The pressure was wearing them down. I've made sure to check in with every member of the team regularly, John said. They've been incredible, but I know we need to keep supporting them, especially when things get tough. We're all in this together, and I've made it clear that this isn't just about hitting targets. It's about building something that lasts. They understand that. And when things get hard, we push through together. Elon gave a short nod, his gaze still focused on the showroom. And the competition? Elon asked, his voice low. How do you plan to handle that when they're likely going to get more aggressive now that they've seen your success? John's stomach tightened. The competition had been getting more aggressive, and John had been watching them closely. But he knew they had one thing that the others didn't. They were building something real, something that people could trust. We've been focusing on experience, John said. People aren't just buying cars, they're buying into the feeling of being taken care of. And that's what sets us apart. We're not just another dealership. We're a destination for people who want a personalized experience. Elon paused for a moment, considering John's words. John felt like he was being weighed on some unseen scale, each word he spoke carefully measured. Finally, Elon spoke, his tone more thoughtful than before. I'll admit, I didn't expect you to pull this off as quickly as you have. But there's still a lot of work to be done. The real test will come in the next few months. This isn't about proving you can do it once. It's about proving that you can keep it up. Can you do that? John didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm confident we can. We've got a plan, we've got the right people, and we've got the drive to make this dealership the best in the region. For a long moment, Elon simply stared at him. John's heart pounded in his chest. He knew the stakes. One wrong move, one misstep, and everything they had worked for could collapse. Finally, Elon broke the silence. You've earned more time, John, but I'll be watching. I expect more than just a good first impression. I want to see consistency. I want to see growth. And I want to see a dealership that can stand on its own 2 feet, no matter what the competition does. John let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He could feel the weight lifting slightly, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Thank you, Elon. I won't let you down. Elon gave him a sharp look, then nodded. We'll see. Make sure you prove me right. As Elon turned and walked toward the door, John's mind was racing. They had passed the test for now, but the path ahead was still filled with obstacles. They had earned a chance to prove themselves, but the real challenge was yet to come. Later that evening, John stood in the showroom, looking out over the lot. The dealership was quieter now, the day's hustle slowly fading into the night. He thought about everything they had accomplished so far, the hurdles they had overcome, and the ones still to come. The road ahead wasn't easy. It would take everything they had to make it work. But for the first time in a long while, John felt a sense of resolve. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something real, something that could last. And he was determined to prove it. The clock was still ticking, but now, with Elon's words hanging in the air, John knew one thing for certain. They had a fighting chance. And he wasn't going to stop until they had succeeded. The days following Elon's visit felt like a blur. John couldn't shake the tension in the pit of his stomach, the sense that while they had gained some time, the real battle was far from over. Elon's challenge was clear. It wasn't enough to prove themselves once. They had to sustain this progress, keep improving, and grow despite the constant pressure of competition and market fluctuations. As the dealership settled into its new rhythm, John's focus shifted entirely to building momentum. They had a small window of opportunity, and he knew they had to capitalize on it. He couldn't afford to let things plateau. Every day, every interaction would need to count, and the team needed to stay sharp. The first few weeks after Elon's assessment were critical. The new inventory John had negotiated with a supplier began to arrive, albeit more slowly than anticipated. But the team, energized by the improvements and the fresh stock, found new ways to keep customers engaged. They hosted events, revamped their online presence, and found new ways to connect with their community. Sarah had become a force within the sales team. She took the lead on training sessions, making sure that every salesperson was aware of the dealership's vision and how each sale was part of the bigger picture. Customer relationships were at the heart of the new strategy, and Sarah was relentless about ensuring every salesperson understood that. Meanwhile, Anna had been working on restructuring the service department. With inventory issues slowly being resolved, the service department had become the dealership's silent hero. Many customers were coming in for repairs or regular maintenance, and Anna ensured that every interaction was smooth, quick, and pleasant. The goal wasn't just to fix cars. It was to create an experience that kept customers coming back for the long term. But even with these strides forward, the pressure from Elon's looming expectations never fully dissipated. There were moments when John felt like he was treading water, barely staying afloat. The business was starting to pick up, but he was constantly aware of the clock ticking. Elon's challenge still rang in his ears. Can you sustain this? Can you build on this? One afternoon, as John sat in his office, reviewing the dealership's numbers, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, and Sarah walked in with a smile that immediately put him on edge. She wasn't known for her easy demeanor. When she smiled, it usually meant something had gone exceptionally right. "Good news, John," she said, her eyes sparkling. "We just closed a huge deal. A corporate client wants to buy a fleet of vehicles, and they're asking for us to handle the entire purchase process." John's heart leaped in his chest. Corporate sales were a game-changer for them. A deal of that magnitude could elevate the dealership's reputation, help bring in even more business, and show Elon that they were not only capable of handling retail customers, but could thrive in larger-scale transactions as well. "That's fantastic, Sarah," John said, feeling the excitement building. "How did it happen?" "Word of mouth," Sarah replied. "One of our loyal customers from the service department recommended us. She works with a company that's expanding and needed several cars for her team. After one conversation with us, they decided to move forward. And the best part? They want to make this a long-term partnership." John leaned back in his chair, the enormity of the opportunities sinking in. This could be the break they needed. If they could secure that long-term business, it would show not only Elon but everyone that Luxury Drive Motors was capable of big things. "That's incredible," John said, his mind already racing through the logistics. "We need to make sure this goes smoothly. Let's pull the team together and start planning." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The team worked tirelessly to ensure that everything was in place for the corporate sale. Sarah's leadership in the sales department proved to be a crucial asset, as she worked closely with the client to finalize the details, while Anna and the service department ensured that the vehicles were fully prepared for delivery. The tension, however, was always lurking in the background. As much as they worked towards securing this deal, the looming presence of Elon's assessment loomed over every conversation. John was aware that the corporate sale, while a significant win, wouldn't be enough on its own. They needed to prove that this success could be replicated over and over. It was during this time that John received a call from an unexpected source. Parkview Motors, the very competitor that Mark had referred customers to not too long ago. "Mr. Ford," came the voice on the other end. "This is Grant from Parkview Motors. I was hoping we could have a conversation about a potential partnership." John's brow furrowed. It wasn't often that competitors reached out with offers of collaboration. "A partnership?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Yes," Grant replied. "We've been watching Luxury Drive Motors. You've made significant strides, and we're thinking that there could be some mutual benefits to working together on certain projects. A few joint events, maybe some cross-promotions. I think we could help each other out." John was taken aback. The idea of collaborating with a direct competitor felt foreign to him, and yet, part of him couldn't ignore the opportunity to expand their reach and share resources. "I'll admit, I'm intrigued," John said slowly, "but I think we need to discuss the specifics before making any decisions." The two men agreed to meet the following week, setting the stage for what could be a game-changing decision for both dealerships. Over the next few days, John couldn't shake the feeling that Parkview's offer might be a lifeline. It was unconventional, yes, but in a rapidly shifting market, maybe alliances were the future. But as he prepared for the meeting, another challenge surfaced, one that wasn't so easily solved. A new competitor, Edge Motors, had opened up across town. They had a flashy, high-tech showroom and a marketing budget that far surpassed anything John could compete with. Edge Motors was aggressive in their advertising and had already started poaching customers. John could feel the pressure mounting from all sides. He wasn't just fighting to sustain the dealership anymore. He was fighting for survival. The pressure from Elon, the growing competition, and the chance at a corporate partnership had John feeling more stretched than ever. But he was determined. He had led his team through some of their darkest days, and now, with everything on the line, he knew it was time to double down. The coming weeks would test every bit of his resolve. Would they be able to secure the corporate sale and build on it? Would the partnership with Parkview Motors provide the support they needed to grow, or would it lead to unforeseen complications? And most importantly, could they sustain this momentum long enough to prove to Elon Musk and to themselves that they were a dealership that could survive the test of time? The clock was ticking, and John wasn't ready to give up just yet. The real battle was only beginning. The pressure to succeed was never far from John's mind. The challenge to maintain momentum was one thing, but the new threat on the horizon, Edge Motors, was another. Their aggressive marketing tactics and sleek, high-tech showroom had quickly garnered attention, and John could feel the shift in the market. For the first time since he'd taken over, it felt like luxury drive motors was no longer the only game in town. It wasn't just about the competition. It was about proving that they could not only survive but thrive in a crowded marketplace. John knew the window of opportunity Elon had given them was finite. Every decision mattered now. The corporate fleet deal was progressing smoothly, and it looked like they were on the verge of sealing the contract. Sarah had been working closely with the client, and everything seemed to be falling into place. It was the win they desperately needed, the one that could cement their reputation. But just as they were preparing to finalize the deal, a wrench was thrown into the works. John received a call from the supplier who had been helping them restock their inventory. "Mr. Ford, I need to talk to you about the next shipment," the supplier said. "There's been a significant delay, and I'm afraid it's going to push your order back by another month." John's stomach dropped. Inventory had already been an issue, and now a delay like this would hit them hard. They were already operating at less than half capacity, and without those new cars, the corporate deal could fall apart. Worse, Edge Motors was rapidly gaining ground, and they couldn't afford to be caught flat-footed. "How soon can you get us anything?" John asked, his voice tight with frustration. "I'll do my best to expedite it, but you need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. I can't guarantee anything sooner." John ended the call, his mind racing. The corporate deal was too important to lose, and the delay could very well be the tipping point. He thought about the Parkview Motors proposal. The offer for collaboration was still on the table, and with the increasing pressure from Edge Motors, it seemed like it might be the right time to entertain the idea. But could he really trust a competitor? The idea felt both necessary and terrifying. That afternoon, John called an emergency meeting with Sarah, Anna, and the rest of the team. They gathered in the back office, where John wasted no time explaining the situation. "We've hit a major setback," John began, his tone more serious than usual. "The supplier has delayed our next shipment by at least a month, and the competition, Edge Motors, has stepped up their game. If we don't act quickly, we could lose the momentum we've built." The room was silent for a moment as everyone took in the gravity of the situation. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "What are we thinking, John? Do we need to focus on getting more inventory or finding another way to generate sales? We don't have the luxury of waiting for more inventory. We need to find a way to stay competitive with what we have, and fast. That's why I've been considering the partnership with Parkview Motors." Anna looked up, surprised. "You're talking about teaming up with them?" John nodded. "I know it's unconventional, but the reality is that we're both fighting the same battle. We're seeing diminishing returns from our own supply lines, and they're feeling the squeeze too. If we collaborate, we might be able to pool resources, cross-promote our businesses, and get more customers in the door." "It's risky," Sarah said. "What's to stop them from using the partnership to gain an upper hand? It's a fine line to walk." "I agree," John said, looking at each of them. "But we have to do something. If we don't adapt, we'll be left behind. We need to stay in the game, no matter the cost." The team fell into a thoughtful silence, each member processing the implications of John's words. Finally, Anna spoke. "What about the corporate deal? If the delay affects us, won't that jeopardize everything?" John rubbed his forehead. "That's the biggest concern. But we're not out of options yet. We can still get creative. We'll offer the client additional services, perhaps some incentives, whatever it takes to keep them on board. Sarah stood up, her eyes hard with determination. I'll take charge of that. I'll work with the client and make sure we don't lose them. We'll sweeten the deal with value adds like service packages or extended warranties. Let's show them that we're still a better option, even if our inventory is limited. John nodded. I trust you on this, Sarah. Let's move fast. The meeting concluded, and everyone went their separate ways to handle their respective tasks. John felt a surge of gratitude for his team. They were a formidable force, and together, they could weather even the toughest storms. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked tirelessly to keep the corporate client on board, while Anna focused on streamlining the service department to offer more incentives. Meanwhile, John continued to communicate with Parkview Motors, scheduling a meeting to discuss their potential collaboration. When the day for the meeting with Parkview Motors arrived, John couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It wasn't just about the partnership itself. It was the fact that he had to open the door to a competitor, share his vulnerabilities, and hope that they would be willing to work together rather than exploit him. Grant, the representative from Parkview, was waiting for him when John arrived at their dealership. The showroom was sleek and modern, just like everything else about Parkview Motors, polished, cutting-edge, and designed to leave a lasting impression. Mr. Ford, Grant greeted him, offering a firm handshake. It's good to see you in person. Thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me, John replied, his voice measured. I'm interested in hearing what you have in mind. Grant led him to a private conference room in the back, where the two men sat down. Over coffee, Grant began outlining the details of his proposal. We're not looking to take over, John, Grant began, his tone diplomatic. We know we're in the same boat right now. The market is tough. But what if we work together on joint events, shared inventory, and cross-promoted our services? We both have strengths that the other can benefit from. John leaned forward, carefully considering Grant's words. And how do we ensure this doesn't just benefit you? How do we ensure we're getting as much out of this as you are? Grant smiled, an almost imperceptible tilt of his lips. I think we're both in a situation where cooperation could benefit us both. You're not my competition if we're working together. The goal is simple, shared success. The meeting went on for nearly an hour, and John left with more questions than answers. The idea of collaborating with Parkview Motors still didn't sit entirely right with him, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that they were at a crossroads. A major decision had to be made. At the end of the day, John knew one thing for sure. There were no easy answers. The competition was fierce, the clock was ticking, and everything rested on finding a way to stay ahead, whether through collaboration, ingenuity, or sheer determination. It was time to decide. Would luxury drive motors continue on its own path, or would it take a risk by partnering with its fiercest competitor to stay in the game? The next few days felt like a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. John couldn't help but wrestle with the decision of whether or not to partner with Parkview Motors. His mind kept running through the potential scenarios, weighing the risks and rewards. He had always prided himself on his independence, his ability to navigate challenges alone. But now, with the weight of competition, supply chain delays, and Elon's expectations on his shoulders, the idea of collaboration had become too tempting to ignore. John spent his nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every detail of the potential partnership. In one moment, he would convince himself that working with Parkview was the smart move, a way to fight back against the onslaught of competitors. The next moment, he'd question whether he was simply being backed into a corner, accepting a partnership out of desperation. He knew he had to make a decision soon. The corporate fleet deal was still hanging in the balance, and the delay in inventory was threatening to push everything off track. As the days passed, the pressure grew, and John could feel the stakes becoming higher. One afternoon, Sarah came to him with some good news. The corporate client had agreed to meet again to discuss the deal. Sarah had worked tirelessly to keep them engaged, offering discounts, extended warranties, and other incentives to make up for the inventory shortage. It wasn't a done deal yet, but Sarah was confident that the client was still on board. John, Sarah said, sitting down across from him in his office, I think we've got this. The client really liked the proposal. They just need a few more details, but they're committed. It's not over yet. John let out a breath of relief, a weight lifting from his shoulders. That's great news, Sarah. You've done an incredible job. We can't afford to lose this deal. I know, Sarah said, her tone determined. We've got one shot to get it right. But even as John felt a flicker of hope, he couldn't ignore the looming presence of Edge Motors. Their aggressive marketing campaigns had continued to gain traction. The dealership's sleek new showroom was attracting a younger demographic, and their social media presence was exploding. John knew it wouldn't be long before Edge would start pulling customers away, and luxury drive motors would lose the upper hand. That evening, as John sat at his desk, he heard a knock on the door. It was Anna. "Got a minute?" she asked, stepping into the office and closing the door behind her. "Of course," John replied, gesturing for her to sit down. "What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking a lot about the Parkview proposal," Anna said. "I know you've been struggling with it, but I think you need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture." John raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I get that we're facing pressure," Anna continued, "but do we really want to tie ourselves to a competitor? Parkview might look good on paper, but at the end of the day, they're still our competition. And if we start depending on them now, where does it end?" John nodded, considering her words. Anna was always the pragmatic one, the voice of caution when things felt like they were spinning out of control. "I hear you, Anna," John said slowly, "but I'm not sure we have much of a choice. Edge Motors is closing in on us, and the corporate deal is still fragile. Maybe this is the way forward." Anna leaned forward, her eyes intense. "We can't let fear drive our decisions. This isn't about survival anymore. It's about building something stronger, something that stands on its own. We've worked too hard to let someone else control our future." John looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about creating a dealership that could thrive on its own. They had the talent, the experience, and the drive. They didn't need to rely on a competitor to succeed. "I'll think about it," John said finally, the decision still hanging in the air. The next morning, John called a meeting with his core team: Sarah, Anna, Mark, and Michael. They gathered around the table in the conference room, where John laid out the situation in its entirety: the supplier delays, the corporate fleet deal, the rise of Edge Motors, and the ongoing discussions with Parkview Motors. "I'm facing a tough choice," John began, looking at each of them in turn. "We've been offered a partnership with Parkview Motors, but it comes with risks. We're also under pressure to close the corporate deal, and Edge Motors is right on our tail. I need to know, should we move forward with Parkview, or should we focus all our efforts on standing alone?" The room was silent for a moment. Then Sarah spoke. "I think we need to focus on building our brand, on showing people that we don't need anyone else to succeed. We've got loyal customers, we've got a great team, and we have the skills to make this work. If we go with Parkview, we're just giving them a piece of what we've built. We can do this on our own." Mark nodded in agreement. "Sarah's right. I'm all for collaboration, but not when it means losing our edge. We've got to take the market by storm, not let someone else ride on our coattails." Anna, always the realist, added, "It's a tough call, but we've got to remember that we're in control here. Parkview may seem like the easy way out, but we've got to trust in what we've built." Michael, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "Look, we've been in worse positions before. We've always found a way to turn things around. We don't need Parkview. We just need to believe in ourselves." John looked around the room at his team, their faces filled with conviction. He could see it in their eyes. They believed in themselves. And for the first time in a long time, so did he. "All right," John said, his voice steady. "We're going to do this on our own. No partnership. We're going to close the corporate deal, find ways to stand out from Edge Motors, and build something bigger than we've ever imagined." With the decision made, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The team immediately got to work, focusing on their strengths. Sarah continued working with the corporate client, ensuring they stayed engaged. Mark and Michael worked on innovative sales campaigns and events to attract more foot traffic. Anna streamlined the service department, making sure every customer's experience was flawless. And John? He threw himself into the task of revitalizing the dealership's image, from revamping the showroom to launching targeted digital marketing campaigns. They would stand out in the crowded market, not because they partnered with a competitor, but because they believed in their own potential. As the weeks passed, the dealership began to pick up momentum. They closed the corporate fleet deal, securing a long-term partnership that would provide a steady stream of business. The showroom was buzzing with new customers, many of whom were drawn in by the dealership's fresh approach and commitment to excellence. But the real test was still ahead. Edge Motors was not backing down, and every day felt like a race to stay ahead. John knew that the road ahead would be tough, but for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face it head-on. Luxury Drive Motors wasn't just going to survive, they were going to thrive. And this was only the beginning. The next phase was about to begin, and John was determined to make it their greatest success yet. The weeks that followed felt like a blur. The decision to go it alone was proving to be the right one. The corporate deal had been sealed, and Luxury Drive Motors was starting to regain some of its lost momentum. The showroom, though still quieter than John would have liked, was beginning to see more foot traffic. But despite the signs of recovery, there was an undeniable pressure looming over them. Edge Motors wasn't sitting idle, and every day felt like a race to stay ahead. John knew that they couldn't rest on their laurels. Even with the corporate deal in place and a renewed sense of purpose among the team, Edge Motors was continuing to expand its reach. Their flashy new commercials, aggressive social media campaigns, and high-tech showroom were all designed to pull customers away. John couldn't afford to ignore them. It was only a matter of time before they made their move, and when they did, he had to be ready. One late afternoon, as John was reviewing some reports in his office, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "John, we need to talk. Edge Motors has launched a new promotion that's going to hurt us. Let's meet in 20 minutes. John's heart sank. He could feel the weight of the situation in that simple text. He had seen the signs of a looming threat, but to hear that Edge Motors had taken the offensive was unsettling. They couldn't afford to lose any more ground. He stood up, grabbing his jacket, and walked toward the meeting room. Sarah was already there when John arrived, pacing back and forth, her eyes intense. She stopped when she saw him. "It's worse than we thought," Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency. "Edge Motors is offering an insane trade-in deal for customers. Up to 20% more on their current car, no questions asked. And they're financing it at 0% for the first year." John's mind immediately started working through the implications. That kind of offer could be a game-changer. Luxury Drive Motors wasn't in a position to match that kind of deal, especially given the inventory delays they were still struggling with. "Are they targeting our market?" John asked, his voice steady despite the rising concern. "They're targeting everyone," Sarah replied. "I've already heard from a few of our regulars. Some are going to Edge to see if they can take advantage of the trade-in offer. They're starting to make waves, John." John sat back in his chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "We need to counter this. We can't let them steal our customers. What do we have in the tank to fight back?" Sarah paused for a moment before speaking. "We've got to get creative. Edge Motors has the flash, but we've got the service and the reputation. What if we offer a more personalized experience? What if we focus on the people who buy from us, the ones who appreciate the quality of the cars and the customer service? We can't compete on price, but we can compete on experience." John nodded slowly. "I like that idea. People don't just buy cars. They buy relationships, trust. If we can strengthen our customer service and focus on creating a more tailored experience, we might be able to turn this around." The next few days were a flurry of activity. John met with Anna to discuss ways to elevate the customer experience, ensuring that every person who walked through the door felt like they were part of the Luxury Drive family. They revamped the service department, training staff to focus on building rapport with customers and creating a more memorable experience from start to finish. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mark worked on a new promotional campaign that would highlight the dealership's strengths: personalized service, expert advice, and top-tier vehicles that were built to last. The campaign was set to launch within a week, but John knew that wasn't enough. They needed something bold, something that would capture attention immediately. It was that weekend when John had the breakthrough idea. He'd been spending a lot of time in the showroom, speaking with customers and listening to their needs. One afternoon, he overheard a conversation between a sales rep and a couple. The couple was looking for something more than just a car. They wanted an experience. They wanted to know that they were making the right decision, that they were getting the best deal, not just financially, but in terms of long-term satisfaction. It clicked. What if we took it a step further? John thought. What if we created an experience that no one else could replicate? He reached out to Sarah and Anna that evening. They scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss his idea. We're going to create an exclusive program, John said, leaning forward at the table. A VIP experience for our best customers, the ones who've supported us for years. We'll offer them free vehicle maintenance for the first 2 years, priority access to special vehicles, and personalized consultations with our experts. We'll even throw in invitations to exclusive events and test drives of new models before they hit the showroom. Anna's eyes lit up. That's genius. It gives them something that Edge Motors can't offer, personalized value. This will make our best customers feel like VIPs. We'll also create a referral program, Sarah added. Anyone who refers a new customer gets a free upgrade to their membership. The more people they bring in, the more benefits they get. John nodded. Exactly. We may not be able to compete with Edge's Flash, but we can offer something far more valuable: loyalty, trust, and an experience they can't get anywhere else. The program launched with a bang. The VIP experience became a massive hit, especially among longtime customers. Word spread quickly, and within days, the dealership saw an uptick in traffic. People wanted more than just a car. They wanted a connection, a sense of belonging. But even as Luxury Drive Motors regained some ground, John knew that they couldn't rest on their laurels. Edge Motors was aggressive, and they weren't backing down. John had seen firsthand how quickly the tides could shift. They needed to keep evolving, keep pushing forward. One morning, just as things seemed to be calming down, John received a phone call from an unexpected source, Elon Musk himself. John, Elon's voice crackled through the phone. I've been following the progress at Luxury Drive Motors. I'm impressed by what you've done so far. You've taken a difficult situation and turned it into something great. But I have a new challenge for you. John sat up straighter. I'm listening. There's a new opportunity on the horizon, Elon continued. I've been in talks with a few companies that want to disrupt the automotive industry even further. We could use your dealership as a test bed for some new technologies, things like fully autonomous vehicles, next-gen electric car systems. It's a big leap, but it could put Luxury Drive Motors at the forefront of the industry. John's mind raced. The offer was huge. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. But it also came with significant risk. The technology wasn't proven, and there were still plenty of questions about how it would be received by customers. I'll need time to think about it, John said. But this could be exactly what we need to push back against Edge Motors. Take all the time you need, Elon replied. But remember, this is the future of the automotive world, and it's waiting for you to take the lead. As John hung up the phone, he felt a new weight settle on his shoulders. The future of Luxury Drive Motors was once again at a crossroads. Would they take the leap into the next generation of automotive technology? Or would they focus on strengthening their current position and competing with Edge Motors in the here and now? There was no easy answer. But one thing was clear. Whatever decision he made, it would shape the future of the dealership and his legacy forever. And so, as John sat in his office, staring at the message from Elon, he realized that the journey was far from over. It had only just begun. The weight of Elon Musk's proposition hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. John had spent sleepless nights mulling over the decision. Luxury Drive Motors had clawed its way back, but could they afford to dive into uncharted waters of cutting-edge technology and autonomous vehicles? Or would it be too risky, pushing the dealership into unfamiliar territory at the wrong time? John spent the next day meeting with his core team, carefully laying out the challenge before them. We have a choice, John began, addressing Sarah, Anna, Mark, and Michael in the conference room. Elon Musk wants us to be a test bed for the next generation of automotive technology, autonomous vehicles, electric systems, the whole future of cars. It's an incredible opportunity, but it's also a huge leap. We're talking about testing things that could change the entire automotive landscape. Sarah, as always, was the first to speak. I think we need to consider what this could mean for us long-term. If we jump into this and succeed, we'll be ahead of the competition, ahead of everyone. Edge Motors won't be able to touch us. But we're also looking at the unknown. Are we ready to take that risk? Mark crossed his arms, his eyes thoughtful. It's not just the technology itself, it's the message it sends. If we embrace this, we're not just selling cars. We're selling the future. People will flock to us for that. But if we fail, well, we might lose everything. I agree with both of you, Anna added. But we've built our reputation on trust and reliability. If we suddenly throw ourselves into something so cutting edge, will our current customers feel alienated? Not everyone's ready for autonomous vehicles. Some might feel we're abandoning them for something that feels too risky. The room was silent for a moment. John could see the concern in their eyes, the uncertainty that had clouded their decision-making. But at the same time, he could feel the pulse of excitement under the surface. They had survived by adapting, by making bold moves when the stakes were high. This could be another turning point in their journey. John leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. We've always said we wanted to lead, not follow. And this, right here, is the kind of leap that could define us as pioneers in the industry. But we need to go in with our eyes wide open. If we're going to take this on, it has to be with a plan that allows us to innovate while still maintaining the trust of our customers. Over the next week, the team worked tirelessly, analyzing every aspect of Elon's offer. They researched autonomous technology, electric vehicles, and the challenges that came with integrating them into their current business model. They also met with some of their most loyal customers, gauging their reactions to the idea of self-driving cars and next-gen tech. The responses were mixed, but one thing was clear. People were curious. They wanted to know more, and some were even excited about the prospect of trying something new. But there was also a sense of hesitation, concern about the unknown, about whether these futuristic vehicles would live up to their promises. We need a way to test the waters before jumping in completely, Sarah said during one of their strategy meetings. We can't just throw these cars out there without a clear understanding of what our customers think. Maybe we start with a limited offering, just a few cars, a few customers, and see how it goes. John agreed. We'll launch a pilot program. We'll pick a small group of customers who are willing to test these new vehicles and offer them a chance to be part of this future. But we'll do it on our terms. We're not just going to throw the technology at them. We'll educate them, make them feel comfortable, and show them that we're still the trusted dealership they've always known. The decision was made. Luxury Drive Motors would take the leap into the future, but with a carefully planned approach. They would introduce a select few autonomous and electric vehicles into their inventory, offering a test program for customers who were interested in experiencing the next generation of cars. The marketing campaign was designed to highlight both the innovation and the reliability of the dealership. They positioned themselves not just as a car seller, but as a guide into the future, offering a bridge between the present and the world of tomorrow. As the pilot program launched, John's team monitored every step closely. They made sure to give each customer personalized consultations, explaining the technology behind the vehicles, showing them how the self-driving systems worked, and answering any questions they had. They were committed to transparency, ensuring that every customer felt informed and comfortable with their decision. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People who had initially been skeptical about self-driving cars were starting to see the value in the technology. It wasn't just about convenience. It was about a new vision for the future of mobility, and Luxury Drive Motors was at the forefront of it all. John couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he watched the pilot program unfold. It was still early days, but the momentum was building. The dealership wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, evolving with the times, and leading the charge into a new era of automotive innovation. But even as the dealership's future began to look brighter, John knew that the journey wasn't over. Edge Motors hadn't disappeared. They were still aggressively pushing their own campaigns, trying to stay ahead of the curve. John's success with the new program didn't guarantee that Luxury Drive Motors would remain at the top. He had to keep pushing, keep innovating, and keep staying one step ahead of the competition. That night, as John sat alone in his office, reflecting on the decisions that had brought him here, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was also filled with opportunity. And as long as he and his team stayed true to their vision, they would continue to lead, no matter how much the industry changed. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights in the distance. The future was calling, and he was ready to answer. In the days that followed, The pilot program continued to grow. The first wave of customers had been delighted by the self-driving cars, and many had returned to inquire about purchasing them outright. Word was spreading, and soon Luxury Drive Motors found themselves not just as a dealership, but as a symbol of the future of the automotive world. And yet, John knew that this was just the beginning. There were still many hurdles to overcome, many battles to fight. But with the team by his side, the future of Luxury Drive Motors seemed brighter than ever before. They weren't just surviving, they were leading the way. And that, for John, was worth every risk they'd taken along the way. The real test was still ahead, but John was ready to face it head-on. He wasn't just a car dealership manager anymore. He was a pioneer in the automotive world. And the future? Well, it had never looked so promising. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of excitement and challenges. Luxury Drive Motors' pilot program for autonomous and electric vehicles had far exceeded expectations. Not only had it attracted a loyal base of early adopters, but it also sparked a conversation in the automotive community. The dealership was quickly gaining recognition, not just for its innovation, but for its ability to balance technology with the personal touch that had always been the cornerstone of its brand. But, as with every success, there was always someone waiting to strike. And this time, the threat wasn't from a competitor like Edge Motors. It was something far more insidious. Edge Motors had taken notice of Luxury Drive's success, and they weren't about to let them steal the spotlight without a fight. It was an early morning when John received the call. He was standing in his office, looking over customer feedback on the new autonomous vehicles, when his phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "John, we need to talk. Edge Motors is making a big move. They've just launched their own electric and autonomous vehicle line. They've got a huge marketing push behind it. This is going to be trouble." John's heart sank as he listened. What's their angle? They're positioning themselves as the industry's first to go all in on self-driving cars, Sarah replied. They're promising to roll out an entire fleet of these cars within the next 6 months, and they're pricing them aggressively. They're putting a lot of pressure on our new venture. John's mind raced. It was inevitable, but it still hit hard. Edge Motors had been watching, biding its time. Now, they were responding to the success of Luxury Drive Motors' bold move, and they were doing it with all the resources and flash that had made them so formidable in the first place. "This is it," John muttered. "They're throwing everything they've got at us. We knew this day would come. It's time we take the next step." That afternoon, John gathered his leadership team in the conference room. There was no time to waste. Edge Motors wasn't just responding with new cars. They were leveraging their marketing machine to claim dominance in the autonomous space. "We can't afford to back down," John said, standing before the group. "We've already shown that we're capable of leading this shift. Now, we need to show that Luxury Drive Motors is not just a competitor. We're the best. We have to find a way to differentiate ourselves, to make our customers see that we're more than just cars. We're the future, and we're here to stay." Sarah nodded. "We've built our brand on trust and experience. But now, we need to position ourselves as the experts in the new technology, without losing sight of what's made us great. It's not just about selling cars. It's about selling the future with confidence. We need to step up our game," Anna added. "We can't just offer self-driving cars. We need to offer the experience of a lifetime. Let's take our VIP program to the next level. Give our most loyal customers the chance to truly shape the future of automotive technology. Exclusive test drives, hands-on experiences with the engineers and designers, behind-the-scenes access to how these vehicles are developed. Make them feel like they're part of something monumental." John smiled. That was exactly the kind of thinking they needed. "Let's do it. Let's create an experience that no one else can match. We'll make these customers feel like they're the first to step into the future." The next few weeks were a blur of planning and execution. Luxury Drive Motors launched a multi-tiered marketing campaign that emphasized their role as both innovators and custodians of the automotive world. They positioned themselves as not just a dealership, but a place where people could explore and experience the future of mobility firsthand. Sarah spearheaded a series of exclusive, invite-only events, bringing in high-profile industry experts to speak about the future of autonomous vehicles and electric technology. The events were designed to give Luxury Drive customers access to the kind of insider knowledge they couldn't get from Edge Motors. Anna worked with the team to upgrade the VIP program, offering even more personalized experiences, from private consultations with engineers to opportunities to participate in testing and shaping new technologies. But it wasn't just about the big events and promotions. The team also focused on cultivating a deeper, more meaningful relationship with every customer who walked through the door. Each interaction had to feel personalized, like they were part of a special community, a community that wasn't just embracing the future, it was creating it. John had just returned from a meeting with the team when his phone buzzed again. It was another message from Elon Musk. "John, I've been following the progress at Luxury Drive Motors, and I have to say, I'm impressed with what you're doing. But I also want to challenge you. Edge Motors is stepping up their game, and you can't let them steal your thunder. I'm offering you a chance to collaborate with us on a larger scale. Take it, and you'll be ahead of the curve. Let's talk soon." John's mind raced again. Elon Musk's offer was tempting. A collaboration with Tesla could give Luxury Drive Motors a massive edge in the race to the future. But he also knew that making the wrong move could cost them everything. The dealership had worked hard to get to this point, and any decision now had to be carefully weighed. He quickly replied, "Elon, I appreciate the offer. Let's talk. But we're already moving fast, and we're committed to carving our own path." John sat back in his chair, staring at the message. The pressure was mounting, but there was no turning back. This was the future of Luxury Drive Motors, and it was time to make their mark. Over the next few days, things continued to heat up. Edge Motors launched a slick new ad campaign, boasting about their rapid expansion into the electric vehicle market. The buzz surrounding their announcement was deafening. The challenge now wasn't just about keeping up with Edge Motors. It was about defining Luxury Drive Motors as the only true leader in this new age of automotive technology. The dealership was buzzing with energy, and John felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. Every decision, every move, was critical. He had to stay one step ahead of the competition, continue to evolve, and make sure that Luxury Drive Motors wasn't just a player in the industry, they had to be the player. It was late one night when John stood in the showroom, staring out over the cars that filled the floor. The lights were dim, and the showroom was mostly empty. But in the quiet, John could feel the weight of everything they had accomplished and everything still to come. He knew that what they were building wasn't just a dealership, it was a legacy. And now, more than ever, he had to be the leader that the dealership needed. It wasn't just about the cars, it was about the vision, the future, and making sure that Luxury Drive Motors remained at the forefront. As the door to his office creaked open, Sarah stepped in, holding a folder. "We're ready, John. Everything's in place. We just need to pull the trigger." John nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then let's make history." And with that, the next chapter of their journey began. The days following the meeting with Sarah felt like a blur. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes had never been higher. Edge Motors wasn't just pushing back. They were making aggressive moves that were slowly eroding the momentum that Luxury Drive Motors had spent years building. Every time John thought they were ahead, Edge found a way to pull ahead. But John wasn't one to back down. The stakes had never been clearer. This was a battle for the future of the automotive industry, and he was determined that Luxury Drive Motors would not just survive, but thrive. The plan was set. Luxury Drive Motors would host the most ambitious event the dealership had ever seen. A massive showcase to demonstrate the potential of their autonomous and electric vehicles. But this wasn't just another car show. This was an immersive experience that would change the way people viewed cars and the future of driving itself. The team worked tirelessly for weeks, coordinating every detail. The event was scheduled to take place at a venue just outside the city, a massive, high-tech building with interactive displays, cutting-edge technology, and a space that would allow attendees to get hands-on with the vehicles in a way that no other dealership had ever offered. But this time, John wasn't just focused on making the cars the star of the show. He wanted to create an atmosphere, an experience that would get people to buy into the vision of the future he was offering. It wasn't about selling cars. It was about selling a future they could believe in. The day of the event arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. VIP customers, journalists, and industry insiders gathered in the sleek, modern venue, greeted by a state-of-the-art display of electric and autonomous vehicles. The cars were more than just vehicles. They were symbols of the future, each one gleaming under the bright lights. each one telling a story of technological innovation. John walked through the venue, making final preparations. He could feel the energy buzzing through the crowd as they marveled at the futuristic designs of the cars, some of which were equipped with self-driving technology. The event's design was tailored to highlight the seamless fusion of technology and luxury, with virtual reality demonstrations, live vehicle demonstrations, and interactive Q&A sessions with engineers who had helped bring the cars to life. But there was one thing John couldn't ignore: the competition. Edge Motors had arrived in full force. Their flashy booth was located across the hall, with its own fleet of electric vehicles and autonomous cars. The showmanship was undeniable. They had spared no expense in creating a spectacle. The bold, aggressive marketing campaign they had launched was now fully on display. They had brought in celebrity endorsements, interactive advertisements, and an army of brand ambassadors. But for all their polish, John knew there was something they couldn't replicate. Something luxury drive motors had that Edge Motors could never copy: the personal touch, the unwavering commitment to their customers. That was the heart of their brand. As the event kicked into high gear, John took the stage to address the crowd. He stood before a sea of people, some familiar faces, others strangers, all of them intrigued by the bold new world that was unfolding before them. This was the moment to show them what luxury drive motors was truly about. "Ladies and gentlemen," John began, his voice confident but warm, "we're not here today just to show you a new line of cars. We're here to show you the future of driving, the future of freedom, and the future of mobility. We're not just selling cars, we're selling a vision of what tomorrow can be." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Over the past few months, we've worked tirelessly to bring you the next evolution of the automotive world. From autonomous driving to electric technology, we're leading the charge in shaping the future. And we're not doing it alone. We're doing it with you, with our customers, our partners, and our community. You're not just here to witness the future, you're here to be part of it." The room erupted into applause, and for a moment, John felt a wave of pride wash over him. This was why they had worked so hard. This was the moment that would define the next chapter of luxury drive motors. The event continued through the day, with attendees flocking to the interactive experiences that the team had set up. The highlight of the day came when they unveiled their latest prototype, an electric car fully equipped with self-driving technology, one that was designed to be the centerpiece of their new lineup. The vehicle was sleek, futuristic, and powerful. More importantly, it was a testament to the vision John had for the dealership. As the crowd gathered around the car, one of the engineers took the stage to explain how it worked, showcasing the cutting-edge technology behind the autonomous system. The audience was captivated. It wasn't just a product, it was the future of driving. And luxury drive motors wasn't just selling it, they were pioneering it. Later in the evening, as the event began to wind down, John took a moment to step outside for some fresh air. He stood on the balcony, gazing out at the city lights, reflecting on the day. The crowd had been impressed, but he knew that Edge Motors was still out there, waiting to pounce. This battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time, John felt a sense of calm. The future was unfolding before them. Luxury drive motors had staked its claim, and they weren't going anywhere. As he turned to head back inside, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Elon Musk. "John, that event was something. I've been following your progress closely, and I'm even more impressed than I was before. You're on the right path, and I think it's time we have that conversation about the future of your dealership and Tesla's next big step." John smiled to himself. It was the confirmation he needed. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he knew that luxury drive motors had the vision, the talent, and the drive to change the industry. And no matter how hard Edge Motors pushed, they would never be able to take that away. As John rejoined his team, he looked around at the faces of those who had helped make the day a success. They had proven, once again, that they weren't just a car dealership. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Great job, everyone," John said, his voice filled with pride. "Today, we made history, but this is just the beginning." And with that, the journey continued. The future was waiting, and luxury drive motors was ready to lead the way. As the lights of the venue dimmed and the crowd began to disperse, John stood for a moment, taking in the weight of what they had accomplished. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Luxury Drive Motors was no longer just a dealership. It was the pulse of the automotive world, and the future had never looked brighter. In the days following the event, John could feel the energy of Luxury Drive Motors pulsing through every department, every individual. The showcase had exceeded even his own expectations, and word of the groundbreaking event quickly spread throughout the automotive world. The future of driving had taken center stage, and Luxury Drive Motors wasn't just a part of it. They were leading the way. The dealership was now firmly positioned as the pioneer in the autonomous and electric vehicle space. Edge Motors, for all its flashy marketing and celebrity endorsements, hadn't quite captured the heart and soul of the industry in the way Luxury Drive had. John knew that the battle wasn't over, but he also knew that they had made their mark. The question now was, what next? The weeks after the event saw a steady influx of new customers, inquiries, and attention. Sarah, Anna, Mark, and Michael worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. They fielded calls, answered emails, and welcomed new customers eager to test out the futuristic vehicles. The dealership's reputation for innovation and trust had never been stronger, but that didn't mean they could rest on their laurels. "We've got to keep this up," Sarah said one afternoon as she sat down with John in his office. "Edge Motors is already making moves to counter what we've done. We can't let them catch us off guard." John nodded thoughtfully, his fingers tapping against the desk. "I know, but we've built something they can't replicate. It's not just about the cars, it's about the experience. We're not just selling a product, we're selling the future of mobility. And that's something they can't fake." Sarah smiled, clearly reassured. "Exactly. And speaking of the future, I think we need to start thinking beyond just electric and autonomous cars. We need to expand our vision. We're in a position to create a whole new standard for luxury driving, one that's even more integrated into people's lives. Imagine a world where we offer not just the vehicles, but the entire ecosystem that powers them: charging stations, home automation, mobility hubs." John leaned forward, intrigued. "Are you saying we expand beyond just selling cars?" "Exactly. We offer an experience that's beyond the car itself, an ecosystem of luxury, technology, and sustainability. People are going to need charging stations, home integration, and a more holistic approach to their transportation needs. We could be the first to offer that full suite, creating a true luxury experience that no one else is providing." John sat back, letting the idea sink in. It was bold, maybe even risky, but it was also the next step in creating the ultimate future of mobility. He had always believed that Luxury Drive Motors had to be more than just a dealership. They had to be innovators, trendsetters, and the architects of the future. This idea could take them there. As John and Sarah continued to discuss the future, Mark and Michael were busy fine-tuning the operational aspects of the dealership. The pressure was on to deliver the cars and customer experiences that Luxury Drive Motors had promised, but the team was ready. They had already begun reaching out to potential partners for the next phase of their expansion, companies that could help bring the vision of a fully integrated luxury ecosystem to life. Charging infrastructure companies, home automation firms, and even tech startups that specialized in autonomous vehicle software. The possibilities were endless. "We're going to have to move fast," Mark said one evening, reviewing plans with the team. "If we want to stay ahead of the competition, we need to make sure that we're the first to offer this kind of luxury experience. It's going to require a lot of coordination, but I think we're ready for it." Meanwhile, John's thoughts were still on the message from Elon Musk. The offer for a collaboration had hung in the air like a tantalizing opportunity. As much as John valued Luxury Drive Motors' independence, the idea of working with Tesla, one of the world's most innovative companies, was hard to ignore. He had scheduled a call with Elon to discuss the potential partnership further. As he waited for the call to connect, John's mind raced. A collaboration with Tesla could propel them into the stratosphere, but it also came with its risks. Would they lose the sense of identity that had made Luxury Drive Motors stand out? Would they become just another Tesla dealership? The thought troubled him, but he knew that this was a decision that could shape the future of the business. When the call finally connected, John greeted Elon, who was already as enthusiastic as ever. "John, I've been watching the progress at Luxury Drive Motors," Elon said, his voice full of energy. "What you've done is remarkable. You've built something truly special. But I think it's time we talked about the next step. Let's work together to bring your dealership into the Tesla ecosystem. Imagine the power of your legacy combined with Tesla's cutting-edge technology. We could take this to a whole new level. John took a deep breath. Elon, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I've built luxury drive motors from the ground up. It's been about independence, about doing things on our terms. I'm not sure that joining forces with Tesla is the right move for us. Elon's voice softened, understanding. I get it, John. But think about it. With Tesla's resources, we could accelerate the vision you've created at Luxury Drive Motors. We could change the game faster than anyone else. It's about taking the next step, together. John paused, weighing the decision. He respected Elon's vision and understood the potential benefits, but deep down, he knew that Luxury Drive Motors had a unique identity that he wasn't willing to compromise. They had always been about pushing boundaries on their own terms. Thanks, Elon, but I think for now, we're going to continue charting our own path. We've come this far by trusting our instincts, and we're not stopping now. But I'm open to talking more in the future. Let's keep the door open. As the call ended, John felt a sense of relief. The decision wasn't easy, but it was the right one for Luxury Drive Motors. They had always built their reputation on innovation and independence, and that was something he wasn't willing to sacrifice, no matter how tempting the offer. The future, he realized, wasn't about following someone else's path. It was about creating their own. And with his team, he was ready to lead them into that future, no matter what challenges lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, the dealership's vision for the luxury mobility ecosystem began to take shape. New partnerships were formed, and work began on building out the infrastructure that would support the next phase of the business. Charging stations were being installed at key locations, luxury homes were being outfitted with charging and automation systems, and the dealership began to offer personalized experiences that went beyond simply purchasing a car. Edge Motors, meanwhile, had continued its push with new electric vehicle models and an expanded marketing campaign. But John no longer felt the pressure he had once felt. Luxury Drive Motors wasn't just competing, it was leading. And as the months passed, it became clear that the automotive world was changing, and Luxury Drive Motors was at the forefront of that change. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was certain. They were ready for whatever came next. The future had arrived, and it was theirs to shape. As John stood in the showroom one final time, looking out at the gleaming fleet of autonomous vehicles, he knew that Luxury Drive Motors had crossed a threshold. The journey had been long and difficult, but the dealership was more than ready to face whatever challenges the future held. They weren't just a car dealership. They were a symbol of what was possible when you dared to dream big. And as the sun set on another day, John smiled to himself, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with possibilities, innovation, and above all, progress. The journey was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?